allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So first on the agenda, I just want to Greg DeSantis is calling in by phone. Just want to acknowledge that. And we have a recognition season.
Yes, we do. This is the second annual recognition for the Alex Moreno Award for Outstanding Effort and Attitude. And Alex is with us here, and so are Mom and Dad. Well, Mom joins us every 2 weeks. But Dad rearranged his schedule. He's here as well, and Scarlett's here, his younger sister. We also have Kelly Spooner, the principal from Ryerson Elementary School, who is going to present the awards and give us a little background.
Terrific.
Yeah, come on up.
Sure.
Absolutely.
Great. Hi, how are you? Well, I'm excited to represent Ryerson tonight and to begin by thanking the Moreno family. We have such wonderful students at Ryerson Elementary School and equally as wonderful and committed and dedicated staff members at Ryerson School. And the Moreno family, while they were here at Ryerson, felt it was so important to recognize our little school and the staff members within that. So they set up this award for staff and for students to be recognized. The two awards, one for the student is called Spanning the Universe Award. And this award is given to a 4th grade student with special needs in recognition of their hard work, a positive attitude, and their contribution to our school community. Students like Alex, for whom this award is named, face more than their share of challenges, both internal and external, many of which are unseen. And for them, it may take an extra amount of effort to simply show up, which they do each and every day. They arrive ready and willing to work hard and always do it with a smile on their face. So the 2018 recipient of the Spanning the Universe Award for the student, it was easily voted on by our staff, was Buwan Bimbapati. Come on up. Yes, come with me. So I get to talk about you. So Buwan is a bright light who really touched everyone at Ryerson School. Not for all the reasons that Buwan touched our heart, I want to share a little bit as to why. Buwan is a special, special student. He worked hard each and every day. His enthusiasm for everything that was asked of him and for what he did stood out and was celebrated by all our staff. So thank you, Buwan, for all that you did to touch our lives at Ryerson. All right, and our second award is called Borrowed Wings, and that is to recognize a staff member. And again, our special education team sat around, and one person said, I think it should be Krista Fay. And it was over, the discussion over. Krista exudes compassion. She is someone who always shows up to work with a smile on her face and a positive attitude, and is that cheerleader behind the scenes every single day for the student that she is assigned to. I feel so fortunate to have Krista as part of my staff. It is an honor, and I say to the paraprofessionals all the time, what they do is such special work. I don't know if I could do that each and every day, and they do it with a smile, and they say, can't wait for tomorrow, and that really does exemplify Krista. So thank you so much, Krista Fay. Ryerson to show how great we are.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mrs. Fay. Thank you for being here, and Buwan, thank you so much for being here and for your enthusiasm, both of you. We're so grateful to you and for the Morenos for what you do to really recognize our students and their teachers. Thank you.
I witnessed Alphonse home run at Field Day last spring in grade 4. It was an exciting event, and I remember the crowd of kids at home plate with him that celebrated. And obviously, Ms. Faye, your work goes without saying. It's been outstanding. Thank you so much for your support, and again to the Morenos for your generosity in highlighting this. And Alex, thank you, my friend. Thank you for coming tonight and for giving us a chance to highlight some wonderful people in our district. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any member of the public who would like to speak?
Or if you'd like to excuse
Or if you would like to leave. Is there any member of the public who would like to leave?
Can I have mine?
Yeah. When you get home. Bye, Alex. Oh, start the car. Bye, Alex. Bye, thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
Bye. Thank you.
Any member of the public would like to speak? Hearing none, we will move to our student representative report.
So nothing overly exciting happening over at the high school. Everything's
Nothing.
going
That's
pretty
what we like
well.
to hear.
Nothing at all.
Morale's fine. Lots of homework.
Yeah, the only thing that has been happening is a lot of senior college visits are happening. Like a lot of colleges are showing up and presenting to seniors and juniors. And I've been already to like 4 of those meetings, and those are going great. So, yeah.
I'm going to test your agility, your mental agility. Ready?
Oh, jeez.
Okay. Are you guys envious that the freshmen all have these wonderful brand new Chromebooks if you don't?
A little bit.
There was no hesitation there at all.
Not at all. Yeah.
I know my brother always, he uses his all the time.
That's right,
Yeah,
Kevin's a freshman.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. He does that a lot.
But I was talking to some of the freshmen about it actually the other day, and they're working really well for them. They really like having them there. And it's easier. It's also easier for me because in the afternoon, if I want to go to like the library to use a computer, there's not a bunch of freshmen playing.
They're not on your
games,
machines. There you go. Yeah, it's an adjustment period, but we're done now.
PSCTs are Saturday.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
7:30.
7:30, that's right.
Jack, you
We'll
sign
keep,
up?
other high school
Yeah.
parents.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Ryan, that's the rearview mirror for you, right?
Yeah,
All
all
that.
done with it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
all that, done with all that stuff.
all that testing. Yeah.
Here's light. Great, thank you both.
Great.
Superintendent's report.
Okay, there's quite a bit here tonight, some under other matters as well. But to start off, Gail and Becky Frost, principal of Island Avenue, are going to join me in a presentation on our overall district approach to social emotional programming. It's a timely topic, an important topic, and I did invite Tina Garrity from MAID, and we met last week. We've worked very closely with MAID and Youth and Family Services, and I asked Tina to join us. So thanks for coming today, Tina. So, Gail, while you're setting up, I'm going to do a little intro, and you're already set up.
I'm so set up.
You are so set up. Okay.
Because we were late. She had some extra time.
So there's been a lot of focus, and I believe rightfully so, around the development of social and emotional capacities in kids in public schools at all ages. There's a number of reasons for that. I believe it has to do with episodes of school violence that have happened nationally. The way the high-stakes testing pendulum has kind of swung back and forth over the years. And there's also been a lot of societal changes, the influence of technology and substance abuse and so forth. For a variety of reasons, and it could be political, financial, it could be competence reasons, ability, capacity. Schools have had a tendency really to react to trends and sometimes neglecting a real thoughtful, deliberate approach to programs and approaches that are going to meet the social and emotional needs of kids. About actually a little more than 5 years ago, the board adopted a vision statement. It's on the website, and an emphasis was placed in that vision statement on the social emotional development of our kids. The efforts that we have undertaken, Gail, can you just mute that for a second because I'm seeing eyes go all over the place. Thanks. I'm almost ready. The efforts that we've undertaken as a district really predate the way the educational marketplace has been absolutely flooded with off-the-shelf products. And that is the reactive nature of public schools. Something emerges as a need, and suddenly you find literally a billion-dollar industry. So whether if it was the technology, the ubiquity of technology in the early part of the 2000s, and then the responses to the testing movement, and now around social emotional, there is a lack of really understanding the context of what kids are going through and matching your programs and approaches to what kids really need locally. So our programs, our approaches are really a systemic effort. We really look at the whole system, K through 12, we look at the whole child, and we really dive into the literature and the research around how do we meet kids' needs in these areas. We're far from perfect, but we certainly do everything that we can to develop and foster in a proactive way, but also to respond and react when we need to when things go awry for kids. So Gail, Becky, and I are going to take you through a very comprehensive approach tonight to how we have developed this over the last, I'd say probably better part of 4 or 5 years, I suppose. And really led to the formation 3-4 years ago of the Whole Child Wellness Team, which has slightly over 40 members, I believe, in the district right now, as well as a partnership. We have Youth and Family Services. I know Angela participates and Scott participates, Cochran as well from Youth and Family. So our goal really tonight is an overarching presentation to the board and quite honestly to the camera. What we intend to do is to take this part of the presentation tonight to clip it and have a particular YouTube clip that'll go under a separate tab on the website for how do we foster the social and emotional capacities of our kids. This will be one resource on there among many, but I'm going to turn it over to Gail to get the, are we up? Oh, we are up? Okay. I can't see behind me. So.
You can't?
No, I
You said
can't.
vision?
You know, in
I
a
have no vision
classroom,
out there.
you're a teacher, you're supposed to have eyes back there. I am going to go over to the podium. And we probably should have staged this a little better. Do you want to come up front here, Becky, as opposed to, yeah, back there? And this will click, right? So I'm going to flip here. This is going to be a camera challenge tonight for you, okay? So.
Pivot.
Okay, so social emotional learning. If you take a look, this was what folks don't, I think, either realize or remember. The vision statement that was drafted and adopted by the board through action, formal action in this room, began in November of 2012 when about 50 community members came to 3 separate education summits. And they were invited. We have the biographies of all those folks that joined us those nights. There were 3 different nights. And all of that input from the community then came to the administrative team, and ultimately, Seth, the only legacy member here, to the Board of Ed. I'm sure you remember that. It was a hot August afternoon where we came in on a Saturday, and the board finally put the finishing touches on the vision statement, their vision for 21st education. And if you're involved in the planning and the curriculum committee work over the past year, you've seen this ad nauseum. You know the work that this has done to drive a lot of our academic work, but what I want to point to is that very, very specifically, fostering the talents and abilities of each child in an emotionally and physically safe environment, and envisioning learning as joyful. Dropping down here, and you see approaching learning with effort and persistence, responding to success and failure with resiliency, reflection, adaptability, responsible ethical decision making. There's very little about academic standards and content standards in those comments in there, those statements. Those statements are purely about the social and emotional development of our children. The great thing about it for us as educators, we're standing on mounds of literature around child development. This has been a studied topic for decades with great information to drive the work that we do in classrooms. So this vision statement has gone well beyond driving the curriculum work and the academic work. It's found its way across all parts of the system, and we're going to take you through that tonight. So just real quickly, how do our schools take a systems approach? And that's a key phrase right here, the systems approach here. Not just an off-the-shelf product, not just kind of what is a hot topic and let's address it. How do we look at the whole child in a systems way, fostering the social and emotional learning for all of our students?
So one way we do that.
Here we go.
Like we
So
rehearsed
for the
this
record,
together.
we have not rehearsed this script. It's coming off okay so far.
It's what, 6 years together, we'll do
Yes,
that.
yes, exactly.
Yeah. So one of the ways that we make sure that our systems that we have in place are grounded in research, stand really firm, are understood by all staff, is through our whole child wellness team. And as Tom said, this team is in its 3rd, maybe 4th year of existence, actually. Again, 40 members strong. And this is a dedicated group of professionals across the district, representing by teachers, guidance counselors, social workers, school psychologists, administrators, teachers, and also community partners such as Madison Youth and Family Services, where we really consider ourselves, certainly never the experts, but always in pursuit of the latest in research in terms of child development and best practices for our classrooms and how we can support students. We have a firm belief that if you're going to have kids be available for learning to read, learning to write, learning math, science, social studies, that they need to be emotionally available, that they need to feel safe, again, emotionally and also physically. So this team can serve sort of as a clearinghouse for decisions that we make in the district. Tom has an idea, he runs it by us. We cull the research and present back to him. We also make recommendations if we see something that maybe we can do a better way. But in the short 3 years that this team has been together, these bullets over on the right-hand side are just some highlights of the work that this team has done. And keep in mind as you go through these things, like this is not a team that works on this full-time. We have full-time jobs in other places in the district, and they're doing this out of the goodness of their hearts because they know it's best for kids, and a lot of it on their own time. The first bullet is probably the cornerstone of all of this work and this entire presentation tonight, but this team actually last year worked at Polson for 2 days to create a list of developmental milestones for each grade level and each age. So really, before we start to make decisions, what is appropriate for a child's physical needs in pre-K, K, and 1 versus a 7th and 8th grader versus a high schooler? What do they need emotionally? So we have a list of those developmental milestones, and we routinely refer back to that guide when we are making decisions. It really is sort of that foundational document to this kind of work. We've also created really clear delineations for tiered support to support kids through when they struggle with social emotional learning or behavior, and really create these guides for teachers so that they know what to do and they know the resources that are available to them, the protocols to go through to best support kids when they're struggling. So that document was also created by this team, and we have some more details on that later to come. The curriculum piece of this work was also supported by the whole child wellness team. We've worked as a subcommittee to create a K12 guiding document. So just like we have a K12 guiding document for English language arts, for math, for science, for social studies, we have a guiding document for social emotional health that outlines our goals. When kids graduate, Daniel Hand, what do we want them to be able to do in terms of decision making and with their social emotional emotion regulation, things like that. We've clearly outlined that, so we're all on the same page of what we're working towards. And lastly, another sort of umbrella that this team takes care of is recommending programs and systems for our approach to social emotional health. So you're going to hear a lot about responsive classroom tonight as our chosen approach for K-8 social emotional health. That was not just chosen at random, that program, Responsive Classroom. The wellness team spent days looking at, I would say, over a dozen programs, different curriculums, packages, approaches, conference calls, site visits, to really have Responsive Classroom rise to the top and recommend that to the superintendent as our approach. And you should also know that we looked at it K4 and chose Responsive Classroom as our cornerstone program. And when it came up to look at 5-8 programming, we didn't just assume it would be Responsive Classroom still. We again looked at, okay, developmental milestones, back to that first bullet. What do our adolescents need? And what program is going to meet their needs the best? It just so happened that for both groups we chose Responsive Classroom, but it's really nice because now our K-8 teachers all have common language and a common approach and a consistency of purpose for our kids. So it's been a busy team, and we have lots of work left to do this year as well, and things that we're excited about to just keep the conversation rolling, and again in that pursuit to always say, how can we best meet the really diverse needs of our kids?
And for the board's purposes, the board adopted a strategic plan via the balanced scorecard. The whole child wellness team is very active, and their work is very active. One of the strategic objectives adopted was to foster whole child wellness. So you'll see a lot of their fingerprints in the work going forward in the strategic planning process. So how do we take a systems approach in fostering social emotional learning for all students? Okay, I can do it. So we're looking at 4 different levels here. Obviously, one of the most powerful research-based approaches towards school improvement is investing in the folks that do the work. It's kind of a simple concept, but when you do that and do it well, you get people who are very capable, who are very effective, and who have a feedback loop of what's working and how do we improve. So Gail has some exhibits to share tonight, but also offline as well, of where those PD dollars have been going, and those training dollars have been going towards improving the skill set of our folks when it comes to dealing with social emotional wellness, social emotional capacities. Curriculum development. So this is what we do. We're educators. We teach. That's our thing. So what do we do from a curriculum perspective? On the very near horizon, we're looking at a K12 wellness curriculum cycle, which will cover our comprehensive school counseling program, our guidance counselors, and beyond that, our health program, and so forth. Becky mentioned the guiding document, which is all the key kind of broad outcomes by grade level. And if you go back to that vision statement that I showed before, we developed a matrix of 15 different student outcomes. And those outcomes you can point to very, very specific student outcomes around social and emotional development. We'll show you that shortly. Tiered support. So what do we do at Tier 1 for all kids? All kids get access to. What do we do for some kids at Tier 2 who need some additional supports? And what do we do for some acute cases? So we're going to fill in those gaps there for the board to see all those different tiers, proactively and responsively. And finally, it kind of goes without saying, and I had this good conversation with Tina about this and with some other folks as well. We've taken a lot of little bites out of the apple along the way. I'll give you one example. We doubled recess a couple years ago at the elementary level. That was clearly with an eye towards what kids need developmentally, socially, physically. We looked at a full-day kindergarten model here. Seth, you were there for that adoption as well now 6 years ago. And it was not an eye to double math and double the language arts instruction. It was to get kids to have time and space for developmental play, to really foster that whole child side. So look at that. We have a whole list of different little targeted programming that we did that we'll wrap the presentation up with. Now we can.
Can we ask questions?
No, sure, yeah.
How are kids identified for tiered support? Is it
Do that.
like parents identify them, teachers? Like what is
Yeah.
is that coming? Did I skip that?
Yeah, we have some parts. We'll work
We're gonna
through
dive in each
level.
four, but-
Okay.
A
All right,
bit.
so we can wait then.
So you might have a lot of your questions answered. So I'm going to start with that first level, and I'm going to pull that apart a bit. So professional development. Tom gave you a nice overview of what professional development looks like in the district and the amount of power in strong professional development. The commitment to high quality, timely, and relevant professional development speaks to all adult learners in the system. And that is research-based. That's informed in a couple of different ways. It's informed by the vision. It's informed by the curricular work. It's informed by our own self-examination of practice and identified need. It's also identified through the PDAC committee, which is Professional Development and Evaluation Committee. It's a committee that's both teachers and administrators that come together and they examine professional development needs, current legislation, and current programming, as well as the whole child wellness team. I did mention laws because there are quite a few laws that are also incorporated in our professional development plan, and I'll go into that a little bit more. But one of the pieces that's really important is this bottom piece down here. This Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning is CASEL, and it really sets the gold standard for social emotional learning. They cite that responsive classroom is 1 out of 23 identified and recommended programs to work on building both the academic and the social emotional base that on individual research over two decades of research.
Castle really is the clearinghouse, and as Gail said, the gold standard. If Castle puts a stamp on it, those in the field know that it was fully vetted. If the question ever comes up, do we have an anti-bullying program in Madison? Categorically, absolutely yes. Do we have a social, emotional, evidence-based program? Absolutely yes. And to have a program that has been vetted by a collaborative like Castle is really the highest standard that we can aspire to.
So you'll see many times people cite that the best response to bullying is to be proactive and to have safe school climates for all kids. And that's really what we're aspiring to do. So I'm going to go a little bit deeper into responsive classroom and talk to you a little bit about one of their core beliefs of responsive classroom. Since we mentioned that so much, we actually did a full board presentation last year from practitioners in the field. That was from our elementary teachers and our elementary principals came. And they had video clips of responsive classroom and really kind of brought you through the process. So I'm just going to talk about the ideals of responsive classroom. They are trying to teach children skills, not only for inside of schools, but for outside of schools in life. And those are around two sets of competencies. There's social emotional competencies, and the 4 competencies are listed there. When they talk about cooperation, they talk about relationships and being a contributing member. Assertiveness is the ability to stand up and to seek help as well. Responsibility is taking action and really being part of the solution. Where empathy, of course, is understanding and connecting and concerning with others. Those are their social emotional competencies or cornerstones. They also have a set of academic competencies. Academic mindset really is that idea that I belong at school and that I bring forth effort and that effort leads to success. Perseverance, of course, is that ability to stick through it and do the best that we can, push through difficult times.
Yeah, what's that? Keep going. I'm going to comment on this slide.
Metacognition is all about learning strategies, how I think about my thinking, what I do when I set goals, and how I monitor those goals. And then academic behaviors are more around paying attention and participation and my work ethic. So between those two pieces, they not only blend beautifully and support kids in school, but they're also things that we bring to life. And Tom wanted to.
So a couple of things. What does this mean in the school day? I mean, this sounds great. Who's going to disagree with this? Okay, but what does it mean? And Becky could probably color this even a little bit more, but I'm thinking morning meeting. I'm thinking those are the times that, we have direct instruction, in approaches here that kind of get to some of these competencies, but also throughout the day. How do we reinforce these things? How, when a problem emerges, do we negotiate through with students and give them language and give them skills and strategies to negotiate through these competencies? It's a messy part of the work. It's not like teaching a kid how to divide fractions, where you can just kind of get there. When it's in the moment, you don't suddenly have to divide a fraction on the playground. You have to do that sometimes in the moment when there's conflicts, or you're working through some of these. The second point I wanted to make is that perseverance, effort, you probably heard the kind of the buzz around education, that was grit. I find those to be probably the most important things we can instill in kids. But I also find them to be the most misunderstood and abused terms right now. There's a science to motivation. There's a science to teaching effort. There's a science to, I don't like the word grit that much, there's a science to it. And unfortunately for decades, it's been a mismatch, as I see it, between the science of that work and what schools actually do. So we're trying to hit that head on, and that'll be a subsequent presentation we'll come back with. But perseverance is a big one, and we'll touch on that again at some other point.
So that's one layer of our proactive response to social emotional well-being. Another piece I mentioned, a lot of state laws that have been developed over the years, and systems are accountable to delivering professional development under the topics in those laws. But the law does not determine it's how much professional development for how long, how often. But these are some of the topics that are covered in the law. And this year we were able to provide, instead of trying to cover that are able to be web accessed, and teachers are able, and paraprofessionals, staff members, are able to log on, and they're able to go through modules that are about 30 minutes per module regarding these topics and many more. So we actually determine which modules everybody takes. We assign them. The staff members take those modules, and at the end of those modules, they have to take a quiz. And achieving 80% or better is the goal for those quizzes. What this ensures is not only that every single provider in the system is aware of these important topics, but they're also able to collectively go through the modules and talk about the topics at greater length. So this piece is really nice because it also allows us to assign additional courses when needed and be more prescriptive. The other professional development pieces that we have in motion is actually through the generosity of a former graduate of Daniel Hand. We have what's called the Pact Grant, which was administered through the Madison Foundation. And the Madison Foundation took the outlines of the grant, and they turned it over to, we had the whole child wellness team examine the parameters of that grant. And we took an internal audit of everything that we were doing for sexual assault, harassment, victim shaming, and bystander training. And out of that internal audit, we really examined more programs and different programs and different aspects that would not only train teachers and educators and staff members, but also involve students and get students in small groups and large groups to understand more about this important topic. So actually yesterday was a full day of PD day, right? So we have many sheets of what goes on in the district, but I highlighted in pink anything to do with this topic, just as a quick visual for all of you to see. So I just flip through the first page, second page. So this is across the district, all of our schools, all of the activities and trainings that happened yesterday on the topic of social emotional wellness. And that's not an unusual amount. So yesterday, one of the trainings was from True Colors regarding Aaron's Law and Title IX, Protection for All. In addition, students will hear from a program called Let It Be Heard, which is really more around sexual harassment and bystander training. And that will also translate into smaller teams and then in our PAW teams that follow up throughout the year and years beyond. In addition, Effective School Solutions has provided trainings in the high school, and as you're all aware, now it's at Polson, so we hope to tap into that as another resource as well. And Restorative Practices training is happening on the 13th, is that right?
Yeah, end of October.
End of October, and you'll see the questions that are involved with that training. That is from Joanne Freiberg, who's a State Department expert on bullying. Becky and myself went to a training with her for several days this summer, and we identified this training as a really effective way to repair relationships and help students to communicate when harm has been done. So what she would tell you very quickly, and what research would tell you, is that 80% of your programming should be the core and preventative. 20% should be responding to broken and repairing relationships. So that's exactly what we're going after, and a little bit more. So here's a really nice visual to show you the impact of training over time. So right here on the left-hand side are the hours of training that we have committed throughout the district. You'll see a column for internal PD and external providers. And here's 15, 16, 16, 17, 17, 18, 18, 19. And you'll see it's broken down into pre-K 2, 3, 4. Each color bar means a different grade level band. And the progression that you see at these large bars are responsive classroom training hours. So that is K through 2 implementation. You'll see the next year we did 3, 4. The next year we did 5, 6. You'll also see a greater amount of internal professional development that's concurrently happening throughout the system. You'll also see a lot of training happening at Daniel Hand this year as well. So I think that really speaks to the amount of time and attention that we paid to this topic in addition to all the other trainings. So this doesn't mean that we're still not training in content, we're still not training in everything else that we need to be doing to improve our practice. Teaching strategies around most successful teaching moves for every child. That's not included in this. This is purely social emotional development topics.
In the teacher evaluation program, I would imagine there's a space for evaluating a teacher's professional response to this learning and to applying it, right?
There's professional responsibilities in every growth profile for everyone. And it's actually the only category where it's a yes or a no. You're not kind of doing your roles and responsibilities. You either are or you're not.
Steph, there's four domains, correct?
Yes.
The entire first domain is around the learning climate and
Classroom
culture.
environment.
Classroom environment, which really points to a lot of the day-to-day as well. So there's an entire domain, a quarter of the evaluation plan is actually about the climate and the culture in your classroom.
So we also, after every single training, so all of those pages, each block has a feedback tool. So we survey everyone. We want to know the level of skill or knowledge at the beginning of the session. So this is a sample from June 16th that we were able to pull quickly. I couldn't pull yesterday's yet. But you could see that people felt that they had very good or fair or somewhat poor knowledge of responsive classroom. Only 3 people felt that they had excellent knowledge. But then the middle column is predominantly 99% of the group felt very good or excellent by the end of that training, with only one individual kind of as my outlier there. And then aligning with practices in the classroom, again, very good to excellent. The people who were fair explained on that survey that it wasn't their role to be in the classroom. They had other roles. Not that the training wasn't valuable, but it didn't align with practice in the classroom because they weren't in the classroom. So when we train on responsive classroom, we train teachers and related services staff members. So currently that effort is going on at Polson School right now, and they're about halfway through the training. It's a 4-day training. In addition to this, in responsive classroom, part of what we do is a feedback loop. So last year, responsive classroom came into each of our elementary schools, and they spend the entire day there from the time the kids come off the bus to the time they go back onto the bus. And they look at our practices through multiple settings and multiple classrooms. So they walk through the cafeteria, they walk through our recess time, and they give us feedback as to the degree that they've witnessed that we have been using the techniques that they taught us. So this year, Brown in the spring will be surveyed by responsive classroom in the same manner and given feedback to that school to improve their practices. But in fact, we've been doing a really good job based on their feedback. So Tom talked a little bit about the curriculum development and the wellness cycle. I would say that I don't know of any other district that has combined guidance, PE, and health to create a wellness cycle and curriculum. The belief being that these are all important and interrelated for general well-being. So anything we learn in isolation without application is a tough path to follow and hard for kids to really use in practice. So we're trying very hard to integrate those 3 components is the intent in a 1-year curriculum writing cycle. It is not yet, but in anticipation of it, and because it's not yet, we did work on the guiding document, which is supported in every content area. Before we launch, we spend several days, and this is just the first page of this guiding document, and we really talk about, as a discipline, where we want kids to end up at the end of their K-12 experience. And we call those long-term transfer goals. This is the first guiding document that had people from multiple disciplines and standards working together. So around that table I had health teachers, I had PE teachers, I I had social workers, I had school psych, and I had guidance. So they all adhered to different standards. That was hugely challenging, but I have to say, I think it's one of the strongest documents that we have. And we were really pleased to engage in that because we wanted all of the people who are providers to have something to go to have a toolbox, to look at what standards would say in those disciplines, to see, in fact, what understandings would come from that, what kids should struggle with most in terms of important questions to ask about their well-being. So this document is currently active. We didn't adopt it yet at the board level, but we did indeed draft the document. And usually I incorporate that into a curriculum cycle is to adopt it at the board level. But I want you to know that it's there and very active. So that indeed will go on the website, and we'll talk about whether we should bring it to board level first. Whenever we do curriculum writing, and you probably saw on this slide, you see all those red words there: problem identification, imagining, citizenship. Those are directly related to our 21st century capacities. So we look at those outcomes for all students, and we really try to match them up to whatever discipline we're doing. You can't be a really great global citizen without thinking about global citizenship to do with the content. So you have to match content with capacities. And we want to see those skills growing along with our students in their knowledge and understanding. So I'm going to remind you of the social emotional competencies that you saw in the first couple of slides with responsive classroom, because here's our student growth and development matrix. And if you really look at the idea of cooperation, just looking at these columns on the top, you'll see critical thinking, creative thinking, collaboration, communication, self-direction, global thinking. What are your thoughts? Which one stands out as something that might work on cooperation? The middle one, there it is, yeah. Collective intelligence is right there at the top. In the academic competencies, they had perseverance, and lo and behold, perseverance is one of our priorities as well. There's empathy. In order to develop empathy, what do you need in these 15? I've memorized these here. Yeah, definitely. In the global thinking category, if you look at alternate perspectives, in order to be empathetic, you need to be able to take a different perspective and take another side. So I'm just showing you this to show how hand in hand the vision statement connects to the capacities matrix, connects to how we select programs like responsive classroom, and why that's a really strong match for us.
So Gail, the social emotional competencies, the teachers are building those into the curriculum as much as they are the academic competencies, or are they more outside, or
These
both?
capacities, you mean? These pieces?
Yeah.
So these pieces tie to the competencies in responsive classroom. In every curriculum unit we write, we have one or two of these capacities built into the unit.
That's math, that's
Regardless
science,
of class.
social studies.
Regardless. Every age group,
Yeah.
every content area, and we assess those competencies as well as the content too. So, again, Tom opened up with the systems approach. This very much is in keeping with the systems approach. And it's evolving after many years. I'm going to have Becky take over now and talk a little bit about tiered interventions. So we talked about that platform being really strong for all kids, that 80%, and then what we do in terms of intervention, and that goes to your question, Happy.
So everything that Gail just talked about in terms of our curriculum work really lives in Tier 1. It's the basis of everything that we do to support students socially and emotionally, because if our curriculum is developmentally appropriate, right, if it's individually responsive to our students' needs, they're more likely to perform well in the classroom. So for 80% of our students, what we offer in Tier 1 is going to meet their needs. So it's the curriculum, again, not just wellness, but the math, the reading, the writing. We have the responsive classroom approach, K8, so all students are getting a morning meeting. All students are getting quiet time. They're getting closing circle at the end of the day. We're teaching them how to take a break when they get emotionally dysregulated. All of our students 512 participate in some type of advisory program, whether that's SAIL at Brown, Pride at Polson, or PAW groups at the high school. So this is, again, and this is just a sampling of what we offer at Tier 1, or the big rocks in terms of Tier 1. But we know, again, that that meets about 80% of our students' needs, and that some of our kids are going to need more. So we actually layer in additional things in Tier 1 based on the needs of that age group or a certain cohort. So this is where we kind of cherry pick certain projects or programs or special days when we see a need for them. So I know Brown, for example, does a Start with Hello week, which is all about including everyone. It's completely appropriate for 5th and 6th grade. At Island Avenue, we're actually in the middle of a 2-week campaign called Look for the Good, teaching about gratitude and kindness, completely appropriate for the K4 level. Up at the middle school, they hit something called Spread the Word to End the Word, which is really targeted about language that sometimes we find our middle schoolers using. We have mindfulness workshops throughout the district and a slew of extracurricular clubs and activities, again, to support all of our students. And when all of that just doesn't seem to be working for a child, we go to what we call our SST process, our student support team. And Happy, this is where you asked, okay, well, how do you identify the kids where, that 20% where the core curriculum isn't working? And it really could be, to answer your question, from a variety of different audiences. Parents can sometimes pick up the phone and call us and say, I think my child is struggling with anxiety, with depression, socially not having the skills that they're seeing other peers have. It could be teachers bringing a student's name to an SST team. It could be an administrator. SST teams meet at each building level on a regular basis to talk about individual kids. Again, when someone's not meeting our expectations, when we have a little flag go up of, something's not working for a child, we get together as a team, we brainstorm, we make a plan, we try things, we progress monitor every 6 weeks to see how things are working. So these are some of the things that we offer in what we call our Tier 2. Again, the next 5 to 15%. So this is when we pull in counseling staff, maybe a weekly check-in or check-out with a social worker, with a school psychologist. This is when our counselors come into a classroom maybe to do a lesson or to pull a small group. This is where students maybe, through SST, we develop a informal behavior plan or a rubric for a child to kind of guide them towards a goal that they might be working on. And then the next layer of that would be for, again, another 1 to 5% where those supports aren't working. We get back to SST, and we have more things in our filing cabinet that we can pull from and match to our students. So again, that might be then using the wonderful expertise of our counselors, social work, school psychologists to work even more intensely with kids. Maybe now you're at a daily check-in or check-out. Maybe now you're pulling in our behavior analysts and doing what we call a functional behavior analysis, getting to the root of why a student is behaving the way that they are, writing a more formal behavior intervention plan. This is also at Tier 3, where we might choose to enroll one of our students in either our PAL or ESS program. So PAL is K6, and that's housed at Jeffrey School. ESS, as you know, is now at Polson and the high school. And these are really highly effective programs that have just another level of structure and support to help our most at-risk kids so that we can keep them in our schools, keep them in our classrooms, mainstream them as much as we can, and meet them where they're at. So
if I may just,
yes.
these are clinical programs that traditionally school districts do not provide. We were one of the first ones to provide the Effective School Solutions program in the state. Now there's about a dozen in the state that actually use that. And then we partnered with CES, the Cooperative Education Services in Trumbull, for consultation on the development of the PAL program for the elementary level and for Brown. similar approach. We have a clinical psychiatrist that will, do consultation on cases. Different though from ESS. At ESS, we actually hire clinical social workers through ESS, 1 at Polson and 2 at the high school, the most acute cases we have here.
And the things they provide kids, go ahead, Seth.
So, quick question. One of the things that I'm no professional in this area, so forgive me if I'm not on target, but one of the things that I understand from reading and studying some of this stuff on the side is that there are 2 approaches to dealing with bullying in particular. One is really 3. One is to address the bullied, another is to address the bystanders, and of course to address and support, although it sounds counterintuitive, the actual bullies,
Yeah.
because usually they have something going on that if supports are provided, it may prevent bullying going forward.
You're correct.
So I would imagine these programs are targeted to all 3?
Absolutely. And in each of our schools' safe school climate plans, that is very clearly outlined of how we deal with all 3 of those that you just mentioned. In particular, that if a child is found to have exhibited bullying behaviors, we actually call a PPT team to get around the table, and again, with the belief that no child wants to behave like that. It's not human nature. It's not developmentally usually the way that is. So to get to the root of why a child is behaving the way they are doing and what supports we can put around them and what environment we can create for them so that that behavior doesn't happen again.
And just to take this one step further, there are situations where a family feels like they're dealing with a bullying situation.
Yep.
And where sometimes they report feeling frustrated because they perceive that the bully is not being punished or the bullying is not being addressed. Quite often, there are FERPA rules that prevent the district from reporting back to the family that's perceiving that there's bullying being done to their child. But also I think that sometimes the district is involved actively in addressing and supporting a child that's associated with the bullying behavior on the other hand. And so, I guess I'm just making a comment more than asking a question that I think while we're talking about this stuff in the context is right for people in the peanut gallery at home to understand that, that sometimes there is a lot being done that addresses very directly a situation, but the parents of the child who perceive that their child is being bullied sometimes aren't able to be, we're not able to shed light on that for them.
That's very
It's a
accurate.
challenge.
And I think our hope is that we're always so proactive that we're eliminating a lot of those occurrences. But of course, through all of these efforts, those occurrences could happen. But when they do, you're absolutely right. We cannot respond about what actions are taken to, once we identify that someone's been bullied, what happens to the bully. But a letter does go home to each, the victim's family and the bully's family, outlining the actions that are taken by the district. And that's part of safe school climate planning.
Part of the issue too, Seth, is that unfortunately, because of a variety of reasons, the actual word bully has become a legal word. So it has a loaded meaning in our field. And if it's used out of that context, we can be having a conversation like this with a parent. Well, they're being bullied, but it doesn't meet the legal definition of bully. So fortunately, we have veteran administrators who know how to kind of navigate that conversation and explain the legal definition, but also talk about what is unkind behavior and what is unwelcoming behavior and aggressive behavior and so forth. Kids, we're dealing with kids, right? Kids do inexplicable things. They do, at least in the moment, and things will happen, and kids can say mean things and so forth. It's the patterns that we really have to address, the context, the culture, and there are times that things do happen. We're dealing with children. Sadly, I think the worst role models that a lot of kids have right now are adults. Some of the worst bullies I know were adults. So I think it's kind of a we have an expectation with kids when it comes to this, but more importantly, we should have a teaching expectation. And these are opportunities through our Tier 1 programs and so forth, and is in-the-moment problems to teach. You referenced FERPA, so for board members who aren't familiar, FERPA is the federal law around Family Education Privacy Act from decades ago, which really, as Seth pointed out, constrains us when it comes to sharing information with parents about a particular situation. We can speak about your child, but we obviously cannot, we're legally bound to not share information about other children.
And then one thing that I would add to that is our policy, our district policy, when we adopted, 6, 7 years ago, we adopted maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we had to adopt the state's new Safe School.
Safe School Climate.
Safe School Climate policies, but when we adopted and incorporated our policy, we built into it that it doesn't only address bullying, but goes beyond that to also address harassment, so that single incidents can also be addressed as a matter of policy, as opposed to just because the legal definition of bullying, it has to persist.
Yes, it does.
And so just for people at home, it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be persistent in order to be addressed.
Sure. And our code of conduct is very clear at all of our schools, K through 12, to articulate defining the behaviors.
Thank you.
But just to wrap up in terms of this Tier 3 work, I just listed there for some of the interventions that we are able to provide for kids through PAL and ESS, and really involve the families, and especially as you get to kids who maybe are school avoidant or are really, not able to learn in the mainstream classroom, we can still get them into school and teach them, let them access the curriculum because of these amazing supports that we have in place. So that's kind of how the tiers are laid out, and again, school teams meet regularly to make sure that kids are in the appropriate tiers. Passing it back to you.
Yes. So to kind of button this up, beyond all the formal programmatic, the training, the curriculum, and so forth, I just want to highlight a number of things that we've taken on just because they're good for kids. They're the right thing to do, and they really meet social and emotional needs. So I mentioned the full day kindergarten. We focus purely on increasing the social and emotional developmental programming. That's why we went to full day K. You'll see it in the classrooms now. We doubled recess. We included it in the Brown Intermediate model for next year as well. So all kids are going out and twice a day, getting a full burst of energy out, fresh air, and so forth. Not a lot of districts do PE twice weekly at the elementary level, and every other day for middle school. It's a great way for physical activity. There's a strong connection with cognitive development and physical movement. I think it's K through 4 for quiet time, Becky, am I correct? K through 4 does a 10-minute period called quiet time. It is a daily period of 10 minutes of just draw, color, read, chill time. Time for them to kind of get within themselves a little bit if they prefer. We took a real concentrated look a few years ago at the GPA approach, at class rank. Gail, can you share just the highlights of that part of what we changed?
Yeah.
And just for the goal was really to look at what is this system doing to our kids, this competitive system at the high school where it's kind of a dog-eat-dog kind of approach. So what do we do?
Yeah, so there's a weighting system that goes along with taking certain higher level classes, honors level, et cetera, that is able to be calculated in a GPA. So there's weighted GPA, or there's GPA that's unweighted, which means that all of those levelings are stripped out. So there was a team of probably 25 of us who took a look at GPA and analyzed it through different profiles of students, looking at the impact of looking at weighted GPA versus unweighted GPA, how they applied to colleges, what their class rank was, how it impacted class rank, and really came up to find out that if you only report weighted GPA, you're giving some kids a disadvantage, and if you only report unweighted GPA, you're giving another set of kids a disadvantage. So we wisely selected that kids select which way they want to represent their GPA on the Common App, so they can be reported weighted or unweighted. And then in terms of class rank, we are able to offer through our guidance counselors, if a student wants their class rank as part of their application, a guidance counselor will put that in their letter. But we are not putting class rank on the transcripts, because for some kids that is not an advantage when they come from a highly competitive school like Daniel Hand. So in this way, we found that kids can feel confident that they're showing what they want to show on their Common App and on their applications. And we really took it to be a win on all bases. And I have to say, I was so nervous going into that study because I thought it was a no-win, and it's been a win for everyone. It was such a relief.
Two things that jumped out for me in that study. We had some interesting conversations with just a couple of admissions counselors at the university level. And when you understand the perception of Daniel Hand, and Jackie and Ryan are benefits of this, as well as almost 3,000 other kids, it is put on the plane of kind of the exclusive private schools in that pile when there's an application process going on. So we want to make sure our kids can put their best foot forward. But some of the anecdotal stories we were getting from students of, I am 1/100th of a percentage point behind Gail on class rank, and I'm sitting next to her in my science. I don't want to do a lab with her. I'm not helping her. You know, kids would kind of candidly share this offline with us, and we thought, what culture are we really fostering here at the high school? Let's let them work to their best. Let's let them work as hard as they can, have a system that honors that. So obviously, that'll have to do with their social emotional wellness is our point. It was a policy adopted years ago by that.
Plus, it was disadvantaging students when they applied to colleges because they could have a 3.9 GPA, even unweighted, at Hand, and still be not in the top 10%. I mean, there's just so many students work so hard to get good grades.
The quote that admissions counselor said to me, for what it's worth, was, is 40th at Hand the same at 40th in your class as every other high school? And, you know, it really put it into context for me, and it really informed the board on that policy. The trimester model at Hand, it's really about student choice. I mean, student choice, that's a huge part of motivation theory is choice. Finding your interests, matching your interests, it's all about social and emotional development. The program studies, we had kids telling us ad nauseum about, you know, kind of workload and entering into a new trimester, a new school year, and having, you know, a little bit of a, kind of a, you know, not too aware of what the impact will be on their life. So how do we help kids balance life and school? Ryan's not the poster child for this with 5 AP classes, I must say, but I'm proud of you for your achievement levels, my friend. Homework policy, we've covered that a number of times at the board level. We certainly de-emphasize the role of any high stakes as much as we can with testing. Even some of the things in the classrooms, our student-centered approach to furniture, flexible seating for kids. I was in a math classroom today at Polson. He had some high tops, some low tops, some kind of comfy seating, and the kids are all working incredibly hard and choosing, you know, kind of where they were, meeting their needs. The intermediate model at Brown that we have opening next year, whole child wellness team. Their fingerprints are all over, you know, the recommendation there as far as what was developmentally appropriate for those 9 and 10-year-old kids. The related arts offerings at the middle school, a lot of choice. Again, a prelude to the high school, kind of matching your interests to your passions. We went to a 2-team teacher model at Brown a couple years ago. Brown 5th and 6th grade used to be, Jackie and Ryan, when you were at Brown, you had 4 teachers in 5th grade. We really endeavored to have much more of a kind of familiar relationship with teachers and students. So, for example, instead of Becky, Kirk, Gail, and I sharing 80 plus kids, Gail and I would just share 40 kids, and we would team teach. And that was really an eye towards kind of getting more student-centered, more awareness, and developing kids along the way. And the overall instructional approach. Student choice is ubiquitous in a lot of our programming across the academic curriculum. Project-based, active learning, and really doing our best to focus on individual learners. A lot of individual reading goals and writing goals and so forth for kids. So all these little tweaks were made to the system with a nod towards student wellness overall. So, in summary, thank you for a long presentation, but we do a lot here, and it's a very important topic we want to spend time on tonight. We have some time for a Q&A if you're interested. We also have to circle back to this in the future and dive deeply into any of these individual areas. But you have there the 4 big areas that we covered tonight. That's awesome. Yes.
Thank you.
And Any
Thank you.
questions or comments? I know you kind of interjected along the way. Anything else? Oh, student hands. Okay.
Can I
Right.
make a comment?
Yes.
I really enjoy, I've heard from so many kids how like competitive it gets at schools, and I really love that like we don't disclose like class ranking and things like that. It's really, I'm a big advocate for it, I'd say. Yeah.
Ryan, do you sense that, I appreciate your feedback, Ryan. Do you sense that that's pretty common around your peers as well, the kind of that's helped the culture?
Yeah, of course. I honestly don't know anyone that's like mean to anyone else like because of grades or things like that. It's not heard of. Everyone's helping each other. So.
And I teased you before, but you are in some incredibly high achieving classes and very demanding classes. So. Thanks. Jackie.
Well, first I agree with Ryan, and I think it helps a lot when like I'm in a lot of advanced classes too, and as soon as the tests come back, everyone's like asking you what you got. And I know there are kids who are trying to track class rank and stuff, and so to not have that information available and everyone just kind of have it be like your own thing that you can choose to share or not is also very helpful. But a question I had was that I found that a lot of my friends and a lot of kids I know coming into high school now are now taking all of these higher level classes. They want to get into this college or do this with their lives. And so they're overloading themselves more than they can, and then they don't know how to study, and they don't know how to manage their stress, and they're like, as you said, Daniel Hand is a very high achieving school, and I know a lot of kids very high achieving in sports, high achieving in school, everywhere else, extracurriculars, everything, going crazy.
Across the board.
Even people who aren't taking all honors classes are pushing themselves to a certain extent. And so I was just wondering if you were having anything else on those kind of like platforms.
It's a great question. Jackie, one of the things that we tried to tackle a couple of years ago was, and you might not even have seen this in the program of studies, where we tried to actually have an area where you can calculate the impact on your life. So how demanding, how many minutes a day, for example, would you be expected for each course, and then try to come up with kind of a summary and say, okay, so I play field hockey, right? I'm also involved in this club and this activity, and I have 4 classes that are going to put me to a tipping point now. I also have a part-time job and so forth. So that was on an informational basis. I think you point to something even beyond that, though, as far as stress management, the difference between stress and pressure. Some of it's self-induced. Some of your colleagues last year came and talked about the independent project that they took on last year. You may know some of those kids from last year. And they had shared that, one of them shared in particular that their parents gave them permission to not take an AP class and take an independent study class. Those are the kinds of pieces that are a little out of our reach and more on the persuasive mode with parents, trying to get them to understand those concepts. So it's kind of a vexing problem, but you point to. But,
I would add to that as we're redoing the curriculum, we're also trying to open up pathways for kids, so you don't have to feel like you have to get in a track to get to a certain point in a discipline. So we're trying to untrack some of those offerings. Like when you look at the program of studies when it comes out, actually we will be doing a presentation at the next board meeting. You can look forward to this. You will see a lot of work that we did on the science end of things to untrack science, to really think about what are the prerequisites that are needed to go into different levels versus how can we allow kids to have a variety of offerings that might give you just as many choices, just as much of an impressive transcript without feeling pressure to always take the highest level classes. So for example, we're doing a 1-trimester physics class that you could take as a freshman or a sophomore, or a 1-trimester chem class. So you don't have to go into the higher level physics or chems without taking a sample first. So we're hoping that that helps a lot too.
So one of the things though that Jackie brought up is not feeling like they don't know how to study. I'm thinking like the ninth graders now are sort of the beginning end of when we started addressing homework, right?
It's hard to identify.
I'm just concerned, like that might become more of an issue as the kids who are coming up have had less homework, and less practice, just sort of time management, and not necessarily needing oodles of homework, but just getting just learning how to do it.
Yeah, I see
basically.
2 different topics there. I see the knowing how, and then my concern is the taking on more, like biting off more than the apple. So I see them as two different problems because, you know, I tease Ryan with 5 AP classes. You can know how to study really, really well, but that's a lot, volume-wise. So they're almost two parallel, you know, issues there.
Thank you.
Thank you both for your contribution.
Yeah.
It's very helpful to
Really
have. And I just wonder, do you also talk to your peers about this stuff? Do you go back and say what happens at board meetings? Like, how much
Yeah.
thought goes into
They're riveted.
Yeah.
the curriculum?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I know that they also, everyone, obviously, it's something we can talk easily about because it's what we're experiencing every day. So
Yeah.
they like to talk about these things too and raise concerns. So.
Thank you. It was really helpful, and I know I said this to you earlier. Yeah, I didn't say it to you. For me personally, this and Becky's gone, but it is as important as any academic learning that can happen. And really, hopefully, I mean, I know the goal you guys articulated very well, helps the kids' minds be clearer so that they can take in the more academic
Definitely benefits
too.
them.
Yeah, it's such important work, and thank you for the presentation. Okay, moving on.
Yeah,
We're not done.
district reconfiguration update. Yeah, my glasses are in the other room, so you're gonna have to read this one.
And it's color coded.
And it's color coded on top of it, which doubly punishes me.
That is really funny.
So we had just a change to our Gantt chart, just some updates we just want to provide for the board. It's copy for each.
Yeah, so we've been striping the bars as we're accomplishing items. So wait until it's passed out. This is the newest and the latest. So I'm gonna start with just some highlights of what the new items are. So in the blue bars, you'll see that we have developed plans for student transitions. Those are currently on the website. We have scheduled drafts for buildings that includes bell times, and that is essentially Brown and Polson. Elementary is still working on some shared staffing and the impact that that has on their schedules. But Polson and Brown has been developed. As well as the instructional model for related arts for Brown School. That's that cycle that we shared with you. We are still in the midst of looking at 6 different plans for possibilities around sectionals that are all related to examining shared staff FTE, but we're coming close. Instructional model for grade 4, clearly that's done because that's been in the ground. Piece, and the redistricting plan has been developed. Now I'm down in the purple bar. And Bill has done a fabulous job in the facilities green bars of identifying furniture to move and replace and looking at instructional supplies. It's really been impressive. And looking at all of the cost estimates for moving. And I want to thank Bill personally because I am trying to give him numbers of boxes for library books that are to be moved, and that I think I'm giving him some angst around that, but he's been very heroic around that work, so thank you, Bill. We've done the GIS analysis for redistricting. That's been posted on the website as well. And then in the red bar, another new item is, of course, we determined the date to return Island Avenue to the town. So we're pretty much right on track. Tomorrow at Admin Council, we continue to work on some of the staffing pieces, but we're getting closer and closer, so
And again, this
close
is
to on track.
critical work for us to transition, but we don't want to lose sight of that. If you're in second grade this year, this is your only chance at second grade. We have to keep moving the district forward and keep doing the good work that we're doing in the classrooms, as much as this is very consuming, and making sure we do this in a seamless way. So I think it's been great. The team around us has been very well, very committed to this, and I think we're right on track.
And So just the updates that you gave are just things that have been completed? There's
Yep.
nothing that's had to be moved in?
No, they're just tasks completed, great.
Check.
Keep moving. Okay, a few other matters. Briefly, we realized that, we've had, you brought up the evaluation plan earlier, Seth. We've had an evaluation plan for all professional staff, certified teachers, and administrators. One of the problems that we realized is that there's a mismatch between the evaluation plan that we have for our administrators and the one for our athletic director. The tasks just don't line up, and it really is unfair. It doesn't really capture the work. So as a kind of a prior draft, want to give you a hard copy of a draft. We'll come back after we vet this with our evaluation committee with a formal recommendation, but we thought it'd be a good idea just to get this out first. And this is been largely informed by, I believe, the CIAC and a couple of other organizations like that that are very involved in this type of work. So we just wanted to give an FYI to the board for starters. And that will go to our professional development evaluation committee and then back to the full board. And we'll need board adoption anytime an evaluation, a formal evaluation plan is proposed. It needs to be adopted by the board then.
God bless you.
Should be November.
In
One
November.
more quick handout. Gail referenced the professional development in the district, and I just thought we'd capture when we have a full day and a large investment of board resources into that day, that the board can see the type of work that happened across the district at your own time. I'm not going to point to any specific ones. Gail did that earlier. One final update, Stacy, we have an RFP that we need to make the board aware of. For board members who were here throughout the budget season, you may know that we have had the annual challenge of financing to get musical instruments to students. And it seemed to be kind of whenever we can get some funding available, we would do the best we could, but there was no systemic approach to it. We changed that this year. We engaged after a research process. Gail had discovered probably the most effective approach is a leasing program. But to engage in a leasing program, we have to submit to an RFP process, which has to get approved by the Board of Ed and get approved by the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance. How did I do?
Awesome.
Did I miss anything? Okay. So this is the awareness part, correct? And the actual RFPs, that's going to go public tomorrow.
That would be
Public
tomorrow. It goes up on the website and.
Oh, I see that. And then November 9th it closes.
That's great.
Thank you. Okay. And on the 13th, the Board of Ed will be notified, of November, the Board of Ed will be notified about the contract. We need to approve it. It's a 5-year lease, $14,000 has been budgeted for the first year. And then after the Board of Ed's notification, it'll go to the Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen. All in November.
Instruments by December, hopefully.
Instruments by December.
End of
Wow.
December.
Yes. So, and Jackie, I know the Sandor family is very into the band program, and you'll be happy to know that we are funding instruments and keeping the program. Okay? All right. That is it.
Okay, thank you. Have a good report.
Other reports,
That's
Greg
good.
would say.
DeSantis would say.
Yes.
Okay, board member comments. Yes.
I would like to thank sincerely Happy and her family for that wonderful recognition we had tonight and for making that possible. It's truly meaningful. Thank you.
Agreed.
I just have one update for the board. As you all know, we hosted, or Kirk, you might not know, so this might be helpful. We hosted since last June 2 tri-board meetings in an attempt to introduce and discuss the 10-year facilities maintenance plan. And out as a result of those really well-attended meetings by members of Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, and of course our board, it was suggested that we maybe come up with a working group, a smaller working group than 19 of us, to kind of really take an in-depth look at our facilities maintenance 10-year plan. And so I corresponding. But Kirk Barnaby and Seth Klaskin will be the representatives from our board. Representing the Board of Finance will be Jude Friedman, and representing the Board of Selectmen will be Jean Ferris and Al Goldberg. The timeline of the committee, we'd like to have that work of looking into alternatives would wrap up sometime early spring. So I just wanted to make the board aware.
Thank you. Any questions?
I just want to make one comment after that.
Please.
So just back to the reconfiguration update, the email that went out last Friday, speaking from the elementary crowd, and I actually went to the soccer fields on Saturday and talked to a lot of kindergarten parents. I heard really good feedback actually from people in particular about the transition activities that have been planned. The Jeffrey PTO was really excited about it, thought it was well thought out and thoughtful, and they're excited to get on board. So just some positive feedback from the folks who are, being relocated. So
Thank you.
yeah,
That's good
Wonderful.
to hear.
yeah, that's good.
Any other board member comments? No, so we'll move on to committee reports. Curriculum and Student Development Committee.
No reports.
Communication Committee.
Yes, the Communication Committee met tonight for the first time. We just started by sort of reviewing the objectives of the committee and what sort of our goals are, what our charge is. We talked about what do we want town to know, what do we think is important, how we are going to communicate with our audiences, whether that's the general public, parents, the community at large. We discussed different ways to do that, whether that's on our website, in the source, social media, outreach, and things like that. We also talked about the sorts of topics we'd like to communicate, in particular thinking about from the perspective of the board. This is different and complementary to what the superintendent is sending out, what staff and administrators are sending out. This is coming from the perspective of the board and thinking about what we are spending our time on, what sort of hot topics that we're discussing. So, for example, we suggested focusing our first outreach, which is to be determined, this is still obviously a work in progress, about reconfiguration. So that is to be an ongoing process. We're going to check out our options with the source, what the process would be. We're going to clarify that, but lots to talk about and discuss. Anything I missed, Kirk?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a good summary.
Great. Thank you. Facilities.
I apologize for having my phone here, but I forgot to print out my report, so I'm going to have to read it from my phone. I don't like to use my phone during meetings ordinarily. All right, so the Facilities Committee held a regular meeting on Tuesday, October 2nd. The meeting was scheduled to take place at Brown School, and the agenda included a public site walk to inspect the school's outdoor facilities, followed by a presentation of the Brown School Playground Committee of its proposal for an outdoor play and learning environment, which we term OPAL, O-P-A-L. The meeting was publicly advertised, and the members of the boards of Selectmen and Finance were invited to join us. Although the other boards were not represented, we were happy to have a large contingent of concerned citizens present. The site walk was rained out, unfortunately, but we held a spirited and engaging meeting where the committee learned a great deal about the thoughts and concerns of the community. The community was able to learn about the credentials and makeup of the Brown School Playground Committee and its process. That committee included Brown School Principal Julie Phelps, District Consultant Mike Segan, who works for a firm that specializes in outdoor play and learning environments, and representatives from the district, including members of the Student Wellness Committee. Student polling was conducted to determine the most popular features of an outdoor play and learning area. Surprisingly, a significant proportion of students indicated that they preferred quiet outdoor spaces like benches and walking trails to playscape equipment. The Brown Playground Committee worked with Mike Segan to design the outdoor play and learning area, which includes play areas, trails, an outdoor learning environment, an outdoor learning classroom, and an amphitheater carved into a natural slope. The site work already started this summer with funds awarded in the current year's CIP plan that was approved by the town and ratified by town referendum last May. The site work includes the leveling of uneven surfaces, building retaining walls and appropriate drainage to protect the investment, and the creation of ADA-compliant walkways to allow physically challenged students to benefit from outdoor play. The Facilities Committee will now take action to determine whether to advance the plan as is to the full board or to vote for an alternate plan to advance to the board. From there, at least a portion of the board's recommended plan will become part of the board's CIP plan proposal for the coming year. The board already voted to advance a placeholder amount to the CIP plan pending the results of the board's further deliberations on this OPAL plan. Finally, the Facilities Committee voted to add an additional agenda item to discuss the board's current CIP plan as proposed to the CIP committee to date. The Facilities Committee voted to propose reductions to the current year's CIP plan based on the fact that the boards of Selectmen and Finance have agreed to discuss alternate plans to alleviate the problem we face with about $100 million of school facility maintenance costs to maintain the existing school buildings over the next 10 years. It is understood that such discussions may result in recommendations to the town for alterations to our current school's configuration, which alterations may result in contraction, renovation, or construction of new buildings. The presumed schools impacted may be Polson or either of the two remaining elementary schools. While the Facilities Committee is wary of advocating the reduction of the current CIP plan, we recognize it would be folly to spend significant sums of money on buildings that may be altered substantially or even decommissioned going forward. So the Facilities Committee voted unanimously to recommend substantial reductions to the CIP plan, postponing, not ending, but postponing these maintenance costs in fiscal years 2019-2020 and 2020-2021, as will be detailed when the matter is addressed on the agenda later this evening. And my understanding is that Bill McMinn and maybe Stacy combined to provide some documentation for us, so we have some paperwork in front of us that we can use to review what those recommended reductions are as we enter that discussion before our vote this evening. End of report. Thank you.
Any questions on, that was an easy.
That was a lot to take in.
Any questions?
We'll discuss this more later.
Yes.
But we'll discuss the, there's going to be an
The
opportunity to
CIP
discuss the
piece of it,
CIP.
but if you had questions,
No, I'll
about,
this later.
All right, so moving on, finance committee.
Mine's a lot simpler than that. We met last week. It was our first meeting of this school year. And it was really a conversational meeting. We talked about where we are in this year's budget. Something of interest to all of you is technically, tell me if I'm right, Stacey, this is our business meeting. Is that right? This is the Board of Ed's business meeting. So I should know that. I didn't know that. And should really be doing a readout of where we stand in this year's budget versus what we have up. We will do that moving forward. I'll be better prepared for that. But it's just important to note that the first meeting that we have every month is our business meeting. So it's very important that you all take a good look at the consent agenda. I know that it's a lot. But moving forward, we'll get more into that. And then we also talked about just some of our budget assumptions going into the budget assumptions. It was a conversation around, because there is a formal budget assumption document that we will forward to the whole board after a few meetings and needs to be adopted by the board. And that's what we talked about at our meeting. I have something that's, we didn't talk about at our meeting, but it's finance committee related. Now, board member comments, can I say it? How does that work?
Yeah,
It's
your
like a
committee
request
report.
to the board. I just wanted to bring it up to the board. So we've talked a bunch of times about school resource officers. I know we've had in committee, we've talked 3 times about having the potentially, like, investigating having a if we can identify funds for that for this year's budget. Discuss.
Is that a function of, in my recollection on the board, that's not something we've done, like looked for stuff like that, especially if we haven't gotten a recommendation on it from the superintendent.
Well, we got a recommendation from the chief of police on that, saying that would be the optimal solution.
Well, I think, right, as our CEO, we should work in, I mean,
Okay,
that's
well-
right. So I think it's worthy of a discussion, but I think it should happen in the context of budget assumptions as we are.
Well, if we can't
Is
talk
your
about it.
committee, is your full committee
Well,
on
that's
board
what
with
I'd
that?
like to talk, I wanted to bring it to the board so that our committee has sort of permission to talk about it within our committee, and then we can bring our discussion to the board. You always, that's the kind of thing that comes up that I often hear, well, the whole board should weigh in on that.
Sure.
So, here's the board, weigh in, please, because I brought it up a few times and I don't feel like it's gotten farther, so.
Yeah, no, and I obviously I'm in support of an SRO. I would love to have one at every school, or every entrance if in a perfect world, right? My personal feeling is that traditionally, the board has, those kind of recommendations have come from the superintendent. And so it just feels a little out of place for me, is I guess my gut reaction to that. But I'm not opposed to having the discussion at all. That's kind of where I go.
Can I recommend that the that the finance committee go ahead and discuss that and make a recommendation to the board?
Working, of course, with, in committee, but depending on.
Yeah, but I mean, happy, all you're talking about is having a discussion.
Yeah, and
about
looking and
something
having us looking to see we have, our budget's about 58 million this year, so looking to see if we could, I think from our former discussions, if we were to work it out with the town, it's about a $70,000 price tag benefit. So looking to find the $70,000 within this year's budget.
And then that discussion would be brought to the board for
Yeah.
consideration.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
procedurally, if the finance committee votes to advance it to the board,
Right.
then it would come to the full board.
Is that fine with everyone? I didn't want to do anything that the whole board didn't know about.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
as
why-
long as
why
you
would we-
agenda it,
Okay.
you can have a discussion about, yeah. It just needs to be, it's a public meeting, needs to be on the agenda, and, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a general, for all the chairs, rule, I mean, not rule, but just needs to be publicly noticed that that's what you're discussing.
Okay.
Okay. Any other? Okay. Personnel.
Personnel committee has not met since our last Board of Ed meeting. Discussions are though ongoing and progressing. Discussions will be convening October 11th, and also Teamsters have a date for discussions in November 27th.
Thank you. Policy committee.
Good evening, board.
Good evening, Gerg.
Beginning of report. I'm hoping that we can look at 6.61 through 6.63 as a group, just to explore first, because I'm not in the room to see if there are any hands or questions or items anyone wants to raise about the three policies that are up for first reading. But for context, I'll put out there that the policy committee has not met since the last meeting we had, but we did not move forward these three items at that meeting because we met on the same night. We wanted to give everyone a little time to look it over before we move them forward, and for a few adjustments to be made that were discussed at the committee level, nothing major. So what you see before you now is the first reading for those three, and we can take them separately or as a group, depending on whether or not there are any questions about any of these in particular.
No hands, Greg.
Okay. First reading. 6.64 school calendar, I do want to pull that out separately just to note that that's also part of this, and that's something that we've seen again now since the last policy meeting, which was right before the last board meeting. So you have that as well. Any discussion of that?
I have some, this is Happy. Hi, Greg.
Hey.
So I'm sorry I missed this for the first reading. I wasn't here. So after last year's calendar, the committee formerly known as planning had talked about the possibility of members, I don't think we talked about any committee, maybe we did, looking at exploring a March break instead of an April break for next year, because for a couple of reasons. One being that the high school families have a very hard time taking April break, particularly if their kids are in sports, because there's practices that they're not allowed to miss. And then the second being that generally, and this is not a scientific number, but I would say 85% of the snow days that we have are in March. I don't know, they're always in March, and so the likelihood of having a snow day in April is much less than, so potentially we could decrease our time added to the school year. So what we had talked about roughly was doing a long President's Day weekend, and I realize this was a discussion and it's a different committee now. I'm fully aware that I'm just bringing it to you. A long President's Day weekend, a long Easter weekend, and then like a mid-March break instead. So like the week of the 16th, somewhere around there. Yeah, it's like smack in the middle of March. And I know Good Friday is already off, and I know you were kind of strapped for days. I think you had said.
So Gail can go into that more a little bit in terms of what you missed with our quandary
Right.
around days.
So what I was
and teacher days.
proposing, after looking at this, is to do a 3-day President's Day weekend, so that makes the March break whole. That doesn't change the number of school days at all. And if you wanted to do either a 4-day President's Day weekend or like give Easter Monday off, make that a 4-day weekend instead, making school go one more day. But if we decrease the likelihood of having snow days because we were out of school in March, that makes our chances a lot better for the end of the school year.
So it has to snow on that weekend.
It always snows during those weeks in March. I literally, you can go back and look at the calendar. I actually was like wondering how I could figure that out if I went
Only
back.
we could
Yeah,
predict the weather.
and I did look, it does not interfere with Dr. Seuss's birthday, so that's good.
For elementary.
That's big in elementary school.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Can I jump in with a procedural question? Because this is, because I am new to chairing this particular committee. When the school calendar is considered for adjustments and amendments like this proposal, is that typically something that we would take back to the committee, or is there not a precedent, or
Yeah.
do we cover it at the
Yeah,
board
because
level?
it's like readings.
Yeah.
So it would go back to
Okay.
committee for consideration of what was brought up at the board level.
Okay. If that's the case, could you send me, only because I'm not there to
I'll show you my scribble.
make sure I'm getting it all right, could you send me a summary of that? Would
Yeah.
that be okay?
Yeah,
Okay. And we'll take it up at the next meeting for sure.
great, thank you.
Any other
Thank you.
calendar questions for Greg? No, I think that's
End
it.
of report.
Okay, thank you very much. Learn liaison.
I am going to this month's meeting on Thursday and will report at the next meeting.
Okay, and then, Laura, I sent to you the rotating schedule, and can I ask that you send it to the board too, so that everybody can mark on their calendars? Thank you, I meant to do that and I forgot. Appreciate that. And a report.
And the report.
Audience response.
Is this where I,
Hello. Hi.
I'm Tina Garrity. I'm the chair of the MAID Coalition, which is the Madison Alcohol Drug Education Coalition. And on behalf of the coalition, I went to the National School Safety Conference this summer. And there were a number of recommendations made by the National School Safety Council, who was hosting the conference. And I recently met with Tom Screese to see how our school community, measured up to this. And I'm very happy to report that Superintendent Screese is very proactive in helping to ensure that school safety is a priority, which the council made clear that it should be. Curtis Lavarello, the executive director of the council, stated that although we are very concerned, as we should be, about school shooters, that we cannot make our schools into prisons, and all the hardware that could be installed and plans made just don't guarantee that this won't happen. As you are very aware, there's many different facets to school safety, and one of the main things that he stressed, and I know from speaking with Tom last week, that he also feels the same, that's developing good relationships with our youth is most important in preventing some of these school tragedies. And also that school climate is, of utmost importance. Having school assessments done, excuse me, was also of high importance. Superintendent Screese let me know that we have done these. 2 of our police detectives have thoroughly gone through all of our schools, conducting a vulnerability assessment of each one, and improvements have been worked on and made. Having an emergency crisis team is also extremely important, and we have one made up of Superintendent Screese, a school administrator from each school, Fire Chief Sam DeBurra, Police Sergeant York, the 2 school SROs, Town Emergency Manager Bob Gilhooly, excuse me, Town Responder Ed Brunt. They meet every 3 months to revise and update plans, and you're about to meet to do a tabletop drill, which was something that was highly recommended at the conference to be done. I don't know if you've completed that yet, no? I heard many times during the course of the conference that establishing a way for kids to communicate with school administrators is very important, that kids talk and they know what's going on, and we all need to listen. Superintendent Screese very much supports this, as well as the other administrators, and they do meet with students regularly, and establishing, even more effective ways to communicate are always being discussed. Also making sure that bullying topics and SEL programs are part of the school curriculum, and we heard an awesome presentation tonight about that. We're working on that and currently doing it. This was just a really brief list of important things that were mentioned because of time, and I know it's getting late, so I wanted to keep it brief for you. Overall, I'm just really happy to report that Superintendent Screese and our administrators are taking this very seriously. We're aligned with the recommendations of this Safety Council, and in many ways ahead of a lot of the national other school systems. Ultimately, prevention is key, and I'm really grateful to all of you for the work that you do, for making this a priority, and that we have a superintendent who's willing to come to the table to share with us what he's doing with the other town departments to not only keep our students safe, but to also help them succeed in life as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Thank you, Tina.
Okay. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. So. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Motion carries. I need a motion to approve the minutes of the September 25th, 2018 Board of Education meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Or abstained? Motion carries. I was like, yeah, you were either very late for the aye or, gotcha. I need a motion to discuss and take possible action on the Board of Education Capital Improvement Program recommendations for the years 2019, 2020, and 2020, 2021.
So moved. Doesn't require a second.
Doesn't require a second. Came out of committee. Discussion.
Bill is going to hand out the recommended reductions sheet so we can discuss that.
I do have the originals if somebody wanted to compare as well.
Essentially, while he's passing that out, the concept at the committee level was on the schools that may, thank you, that may most likely be subject to some kind of potential alterations under the alternatives to the 10-year maintenance plan. We wanted to spend as little as possible, pushing it off one more year, while the committee expressed, and my personal feeling as well, is that when we created and voted on this 10-year maintenance plan and on the CIP plan that resulted from it, we meant it, and those are those are items that need to be done at these schools. However, in the event that these schools or some combination of them or one of them undergoes renovation, closure, or you know, a new build, it would be really frustrating to the town and you know, really cutting off our nose to spite our face to put new appointments for maintenance into a school that realistically we may not get the benefit of beyond a year or two. I'm overcoming my urge to keep the plan the way it is in order to make substantial reductions based on the principles I just espoused.
When do you expect to know that we're gonna build a new school? You think we're gonna know that within a year?
No.
So how would you say, like, for example, you think you'll just, like,
Well, I don't.
you know what I'm
Well,
saying?
Right.
Like, that
I
seems
think-
awfully fast to come to some kind of a conclusion plus referendum plus, that seems very aggressive.
So, my understanding, and Seth, you can correct me if I'm wrong, was this really was just opened up so that they could explore it. It might be that the board decides to stick with this and move forward.
These are the reductions, or this is what we put in?
What we're putting in for 19, yes.
Yeah, this is the reduced version you're looking at right now. So this has the reductions to our original CIP plan taken out from Ryerson, Jeffrey, and Paulson, largely.
So Seth,
Yes.
we're dropping 1920 from 2.3 to 1.2. And 2021 from 16 to 4 roughly. And then loading that difference into 21-22, which now comes out at 30 instead of 16.
We're shifting
Yeah.
1920 and 2021
Into.
when there's a coupled project. The way CIP asks us to do it is to put the planning in one year for a big
Right.
change, and that big change the following year. So it's not all in one year. So when we had to move out the planning dollars, we also had to move out the construction dollars for that maintenance item.
No, but there's a fairly large number now in 21-22.
Yes.
30 million.
And we are, yes, and we recognize that, but it buys us time to come up with alternatives to this $100 million plan that the community can consider.
So then we're comfortable that none of the reductions, well, I mean, you know, 2.3 to 1.2 is not that much, but then the following year, it's going from like 16 to 4. And in that reduction of basically $12 million, there's not anything in there that's gonna leave the schools, not in a harsh way, that's a poor choice of words,
Yeah.
but there's not something that really
Emergent.
should have been done, that needs to be done, that should have been
Yeah,
done.
we consulted carefully with Bill on this, and he can speak to it in a little bit more depth if you'd like, but, and thank you, Bill, for all of your kind assistance with this. But we discussed at length what items could be moved without causing any injury or safety or security issues for the kids. We were, and the staff and the faculty. We were very mindful of
Yeah, I
those.
didn't mean to imply that, but
Yeah.
I just, but.
No, but it's a
you
good
know,
question.
But
Thank
it's
you.
a big change. I
Yes.
just wondered what we were moving back, if you will.
So for clarification, we met Tuesday last week with the facilities committee. I took my notes and I produced this document. Hopefully it reflects what you thought. There was another piece of information that you asked us to gather that we did was the recommendation from the athletic department. And I did not adjust theirs at all. I just given you their email, they gave a priority list. And I did not take any liberties to their list. I just printed it out and
And that's 217.
yeah, so I think that's important that we talk about that. other big topic, I think it's the biggest topic, is the playground. We discussed the playground when the committee came together, and there was a whole conversation about the playground in the committee, which I thought was, one of the biggest. You don't want to hear my part.
Good night, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, go study. Much more important than my stuff. The playground.
Can I just jump in real quick? Can somebody send me an image of these?
Yes, I'll take it.
Thank you. Emily's on it.
So, the playground was expanded from the original one that we did a year ago. It was just a play area with a traditional playground that you would see pieces and the surface. We expanded significantly into the woods with an outdoor classroom and some walkways and a amphitheater kind of situation. So we expanded the play area and play learning center. We also put a contingency on there that I put in the numbers, so it did expand. I want to clarify that as well. I think that's the two things that I want to clarify is the athletics priority and the changes I made from the original plan that you had before you, that you approved in June 19th, which I have on the bottom corner. The June 19th is the original approval. I revised it and I put the handwritten revision date of the 2nd is when the committee made the revision. So I think that we should look over the revisions I did to make sure that the committee's okay with it and it makes sense. And to answer your question, these are planning numbers for capital improvements.
Right, but that, and what you just mentioned, Bill, with respect to the expansion of the playground.
Yes.
And also the athletic requirements, that's in the $1.2 million.
Yes. The $1.2 million has the play area and the learning center outside and all the athletic programs that they put in. I did not take the priority and say, oh, I'm only going to put number 1 there. I just left it for other people to make those decisions.
So the playground that's on here now.
Yes.
That's like $655,000.
Yes.
That's in addition to the $187,000.
That is
this year.
correct.
So the total playground is $850,000.
Which is what
yeah.
it was before.
Well, it was $634,000 in the old,
Yeah,
in the one
no.
we voted through,
I thought it was 800.
including the $187,000.
Yeah, no, it's 844. I'm looking for my number here. It's
Yeah, 844, and that includes the site improvements that were already covered, and that, so really, you can't really count that because that money's already been,
Well, except
Pre-budgeted
I think there was
this year.
discussion, who was on CIP at that time? You, wasn't there a discussion that it was not gonna be like a down payment on a much larger playground? When that money was granted by CIP?
I think that was narrowly defined for site, the 189 was site improvements.
Yeah, I was at the CIP meeting and I did the presentations and I've heard that argument before, but I never recall that. I thought we broke it up because we didn't want to fund the whole project. We wanted to look into the pieces and we wanted to have what we were gonna do.
Yeah.
And so it's the first time we ever put a committee together with the teachers, myself, a professional service, and we came out with what the kids wanted, what we thought the kids needed for the area, and then we came back with the real number. That's what I recall.
I totally get that, and I think it's a wonderful plan, but we're asking for $100 million, and for $1 million of it to be, almost $1 million of it to be a playground for essentially, I know it's 2 grades, but it's really 1 grade, because the 5th grade has been fine with what
The
they've done.
significant difference between this area and any other playground that we have is we have to clear the space, we have to comply with ADA, we have to do significant site work, and that's where, if you're gonna round numbers, it's $189,400, $200 grand goes into the site development. I gotta put in retaining walls, drainage, the hill, it's up on a hill, I gotta do a lot of site work and preparation to make it comply. And clearing a significant area. So it's definitely not, historically, the playgrounds were built by the PTO. And then we put them in our capital plan and we would just replace the pieces, the old wood structures, and we started at 65,000, then I got it up to 95,000. And all I did is take the old structures out. We had no drainage. We put it in the same spot that they were before. I cut some trees back. That's how we did the play areas. This is a brand new facility, a brand new area for learning and playing. know, my mother, who's a retired teacher, wanted to come to the meeting. I'm so glad she didn't. She's 86 years old. She couldn't wait to come talk about how important she thought it was. She's an educator.
I understand all that. I'm just looking at it in the broader context of everything we're asking for.
Yeah, I have 2 points to make to that. First of all, the Facilities Committee has not yet voted on what its final version of the plan, if anything, it will put forward to the full board. So it's a bit premature to assume that we're going to spend even another $664,000 in that given year. Secondly, I think it's important also to note that there's a 15% contingency on that, and contingency is just what it sounds like. You have to add on a safe margin onto a project when you're planning for it, in case anything unforeseen comes up, like you hit a big ledge and you need to use dynamite to get through it or whatever. That could be expensive. But the experience that we've had with Bill managing projects, we've come in very low on any dipping into any contingency. So I think it's really a mischaracterization to think of this as a $664,000 project. The additional amount is only, it's substantially lower than that. It's like $118,000 lower than that. And what's that?
We've already spent something. All right, I understand.
Yeah, but we had to spend something.
Yeah.
So, and if you do anything back there to make it appropriate for 4th graders, even if you don't include the 5th graders, it would cost something. So the difference between $189,000 that we spent on significant site work for reasons that Bill detailed, and to protect any future investment we put there, so it doesn't slide off the hill in the rain. But I think, and what was actually spent is probably not as big a difference. And I think we run the risk of prejudging and potentially demagoguing this if we're not allowed to go through our full process of determining as a facilities committee what we want to put forward and discussing it as a full board and coming up with a plan. Now, the CIP program, the way it works, the way the CIP committee in town works, is they require 5-year planning ahead of time from each board. And so we provided that 5-year planning, and this goes to your question as well, Kirk. Depending on what we vote on as a facilities committee for this project, and depending on what we vote on as a board right now on these reductions, the recommended reductions, you talked about it'll push more money into the following year, but that's only theoretically, because you could then push everything else off another year, because the CIP, even though it requests 5-year advanced planning, you're really only locked into 1 year at a time.
Well, that's right, because that's what's going to go into the budget that the town will vote on.
Yes.
This spring.
Yeah.
My concern, Seth, was that we not, back in too much.
Yep.
So that we, we're missing something that really, on which we really should be spending money.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I just want, I know that this has a tendency to turn into a playground discussion, but I just want to bring it back to overall, and Galen and I were at the CIP meeting, and based on our tri-board meetings, and the idea of exploring other alternatives to this whole plan, we're asked to take another look at it and good faith, and figure out what is reasonable to push out so that they have a better understanding. Am I articulating that properly? And so that is what is really on the table for all of us to decide, that obviously there are significant needs in the district, and we need to put forward something by Thursday to the Board of Selectmen to discuss. So I think we instead of getting marked down on one particular line item.
I did not bring up the playground. I was just, he was pointing it out, I was merely responding.
I was pointing out
Yeah.
the issues that need to be decided.
I appreciate it.
Well, we all know the playground's gonna come up.
Yeah, right.
in
Well, of
discussions.
course it is,
Yeah.
of course it is, and to that point, I think, from where, and I'm speaking for myself only, it's a priority because we're putting new programming in a school
Mhm.
with recess twice a day and no play structure for kids. For me, it's as much as a safety and security issue as it is a social emotional issue, which we all learned tonight is as important. So you're right, and
Yeah, I did not mean to imply that it's not appropriate, it's just that it's an issue that
of
we're gonna-
course,
with which we're gonna be confronted.
of course, and I think, well,
And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't move ahead, it just means we need to be prepared to
address it.
address the
Yeah,
issue.
and to some extent,
I agree.
we kind of need to vote tonight on larger reductions, as we've been discussing, even though we're a little bit flying blind as to what the exact shape of the Opal project's gonna be, because the facilities committee hasn't had an opportunity to digest and discuss and vote on the size of that project.
Would you,
Can I just
if I'm
clarify one
following
thing?
correctly,
I just want to clarify one thing, the board already did vote on all of these in June.
Yes.
So there is a number the board voted on. You're
Yes.
talking about modifying that number, whether if it's up or if it's down, that's what's happening. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stacy, we need to have a number for the Board of Selectmen to advance projects to CIP by Thursday.
we're talking about going down to $1.2 million.
Yeah, but it's the same 5-year number across 5 years, though, right? The total's the same across 5 years?
Yes, all we did was shift it out 1 year.
So we're not actually reducing the number, we're
Correct.
just changing the years that we
The
budgeted.
distribution.
But
The Board of Selectmen will be looking at the 10-year plan as submitted, as approved by you all. And they will be deciding what they want to move forward to the CIP committee. Their deadline is this Friday. So if there is a revision, if you want them to consider one project over another in the first year or two, now's the time to ask them to do that, knowing that they do have the full 10-year plan. However, they're going to be focusing on the 5-year plan, especially years 1 and 2. So this is a time where they ask for you all to reconsider what you want in years 1 and 2 for a reasonable number, while we're still looking at the full 10-year, $100 million plan, but what you want to do in order to submit it forward throughout the budget process.
So what's important to note is that the number that was voted on in June, or will be either amended or corrected for the Opal project, the playground at Brown, regardless of the facilities committee, saying this structure or that structure, this goes there, that goes there, that number is going to be firmed up tonight, either up, down, or the same. Is that correct?
For the purposes of the CIP plan going to the Board of Selectmen on
And that'll be the number that
Thursday,
the
yes.
board gets to work with going forward. That number will not change after that point, at least unless some kind of
And if any
Unless
of,
something else happens out there.
other actions taken.
Correct.
So, all right, so we propose $1.2 million to the
That's what we call
CIP.
the athletic
The Board of Selectmen approves $1.2 million. It's ours to spend as we see fit.
it doesn't have to, I
Is
thought,
that how it works, Stacy?
they don't
I'm
want to.
sorry?
My question is,
I don't think so.
we have to submit a number, an overall number, to the Board of Selectmen. They have to make the decision by Friday, correct?
Correct.
Let's say that they okay the $1.2 million for 2019-20. But they can't do a line item veto on specific projects.
Yes.
It's our, they can't.
Yeah.
This particular,
They will
This
go
isn't like our
through every
budget.
All right,
project.
right,
CIP they
got it,
can.
okay.
Yes, they will
You asked
sit
that
there
question.
and go through each and every
Yeah.
project, so if you
Right.
make no changes
Okay, fine.
tonight,
Understood.
they'll take your original plan and go through each project and decide what they wanna move forward.
Got it.
So
So
if we
this
want to
is
have
a-
some control over what we want to move forward and have them consider, it behooves us to be reasonable and put forward an alternate plan from what we've already stood behind. Another thing to keep in mind is it's not going to be a full 1.2 if we also consider the side note from the athletics department, and we say, well, let's do 1.2 this year, and we could put the rest off for a year or something like that. So there's a substantial amount there as well, because the number we remember discussing at the Facilities Committee meeting on last Tuesday, a week ago, was, we also took out a substantial amount of the athletic expenditures and in 1920 and pushed them off. And so it was really like 700,000, not 1.2 million. So that's a very reasonable number, we feel, to put forward to the Board of Selectmen, that we might have a reasonable chance of getting it passed through to the CIP committee.
I think I'm just concerned because we've spent the last year telling everybody in town what horrible shapes our schools are in.
I agree.
That
Yep.
we're gonna put no money into Jeffrey and Ryerson, and these numbers just basically ensure that we have to go to a new referendum, the way it set it up like this. Because we're still, no, they're not gonna approve, CIP's never gonna approve $30 million for us in 1 year.
No, but that can be re-equilibrated too once we get there.
But the CIP plan is always incorporated in the town referendum on budget anyway,
Right.
so we have to go to
But if we
referendum.
keep putting it off
regardless.
at these schools, it's just gonna get worse.
I agree, except for the only thing worse
Yeah.
in my mind than paying a lot of money up front to do maintenance that really should be done, next year rather than being put off yet another year, is to spend that money and find that we've spent good money after bad and been irresponsible fiduciaries because we knew that there was a good chance that one of those schools might close
Well, I think too, it's important, because
or be renovated.
your point is well taken and something that I watched the committee grapple with as well, in terms of the needs of these facilities but what this does is gives that tri-board working group an opportunity to really look and dig in with a new perspective from board members who have overall perspective of other projects going on in the town with the Board of Selectmen or the Board of Finance, who are focused on, not just Board of Ed projects, but other projects that are happening or planned within the town, to hopefully join forces with those other two boards. And pushing this out a year gives us the room to investigate that and potentially bundle a bond or potentially build a new school or potentially, I think there are things we haven't explored. And according to Billy, these things that have been pushed out can wait a year. You wouldn't want to push them out much more than that.
I was trying to answer your question when you said about,
But we did
issues
ask
of the
that
school.
specifically.
These are capital projects.
Right.
None of these should be 1 year sensitive. They're planning. So roofs, air conditioning, doors and windows, replacement of stuff that's not broken, or I would fix it now. You should plan on replacing them because, heating and air conditioning units break down. And if you don't replace them when they're old and tired, you can't get the parts, it takes longer to fix. We have those issues now. When something breaks, it's harder for us to fix, it takes longer. We're gonna keep them going. There's no catastrophic failures.
And that's why we built the 4% escalation into the plan as well, recognizing you can't get everything done. The whole plan was upsetting to everybody in the community who knew about it when oh my goodness, $100 million over 10 years, we can't do that. We all know that. And so to some extent, we're dealing in the theoretical to begin with. And yes, we have a duty as a board to make sure that safety and security issues are addressed as they need to be.
Right.
And then anything else is really, there's a little bit of play. But we realize by pushing stuff off, it's gonna cost us more.
Yeah, Mike.
Can I jump in and add that, as someone who's been on this committee, first of all, I appreciate the work of everyone that's involved here, including Bill, to sort this out. I want to echo what everyone else or what others are saying here, to indicate that if the other boards, as they've indicated, are willing to sit down and think about a bigger plan, really emphasize that, think about where we're headed. We have that in front of us, and at the same time, we have in front of us some very necessary things that have to be part of this proposal as we see it in front of us now. I think, given those two things, this is the most reasonable approach we can take.
huge amount as part of the budget, and we saw what happened when we went after 32 million in the last referendum. It got knocked down, and if we move projects out with the expectation that we're gonna be able to make those required expenditures, and then we can't, then what are we gonna do?
Well, the town does have a procedure if, God forbid, something happens, like, a catastrophic failure of a piece of equipment that is needed
Your
for,
roof or whatever.
roof, whatever, it starts leaking, caves in, whatever, then you can go for an emergency, special appropriation. But, the types of maintenance we're talking about here and where we have them planned, logistically, we're not gonna be facing a cave-in of a roof. We're just, if we ripple everything out, starting from this coming year and just shift everything over a year through the whole 10 years, 14 years, then, I think that's a more realistic way of looking at what would probably be the result if we didn't end up also having some changes in the school configuration.
Right, except that then, but it just seems to me, Seth, that it might be easier to sell 15 million than 30 million.
A couple of things, Kurt, to maybe help clarify, just being at the facilities committee meeting last time. In July, when the three boards came together, there was a sentiment in the room, and I think it was shared among members of all three boards, that is this the only approach? Is this it? Because I think everyone has kind of expressed that, if this is the only approach, this is gonna be a very problematic route to take. So there was a stepping back. Katie, Tom Banish, Gene Fitzgerald and I met, and the idea was raised at that meeting in July of, could a couple of us from each board get together and maybe see, is there a door number 2, a door number 3, which the previous board had done, some of those members were here. Back in 14, 15, there was an order of magnitude number that was given to us, without the report that Billy did, that said, you're looking at $80 to $100 million for just basic maintenance. Well, lo and behold, they were pretty accurate. But that July meeting kind of precipitated the conversation. The follow-up then came, Katie worked with the other boards. And Greg and Galen and Seth, if I'm mistaken, correct me, this is a working document, a planning document. Those futuristic numbers, as Bill always said, can always be modified and changed if necessary. This is a plan. But this creates space, although as Happy pointed out, the timeline is tight to have a legal commitment, but a consensus commitment among the three boards, maybe by March, that we have some other options we want to vet with the public. And this creates time for us to do that, although that number in 21, 22 certainly is, a CIP can absorb 1/30th of that number. Go ahead, Dan.
No, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I think the purpose of this really tonight is, the committee said, to create space for that group to spend 6 months together, because nothing can be done on this end without selectmen and finance moving it to the public. So at least getting the fingerprints of all three boards together. And if there is no other alternative, we go back and revisit this again. So I think that's the purpose of this. Those numbers are real project numbers, but would we go and say it's wise for just a $30 million year, not without some very, very serious consideration? This was really a look at the next 2 years.
We can't front load anything from further years into the number that's already been approved.
Can you ask me that again?
We can't front load anything from years out, like, you know how you have to, like, the first year you do, like, hire a company to do the surveys and then
Yes.
you can't front load that and take up the number that's already been approved for this coming year? You can't move things around that way?
So take some money that I've already committed to other projects and do some of this work?
Like line item transfers?
No, I mean.
Or across years?
Across years, I mean,
Yeah.
so, like, you have HVAC renovations in 2025, with Daniel Hand,
Yep.
102. Can't that go into this year's number, and, you know what I mean, instead of.
To balance out those numbers.
Yeah, I don't know, it seems.
What I'd like to say is that we're on a highway, we only have 4 exit ramps, right? There's the maintenance plan, there's another referendum on rebuilding and renovating the school, there might be a consolidation, or there's, I guess, just keep driving and do nothing, right? What we need, maybe that destination is, we have to make a hard decision 2 years from now. We can't possibly make it now, right? So we have 1 year to burn, and we're burning it right now in the interest of setting forth a realistic, good faith statement of the board's priorities and what the board selectmen feel they can work with, right? So I think that's, so, we can't, so I think if it comes to, so we will have to make a decision on the 30 million. It could be HVAC funds, I think it's a brilliant idea, for instance, all right? But we, the decision will have to be made before that, right?
It's not,
And so in a way, it's not gonna be like the pig through the python all in 2021.
it wasn't so much questioning the 30 million as it was, how do we want to bring the 30 million to the table in two $15 million chunks or in one?
It might not come to, that's a townwide problem. I think that's a good formulation. It's a townwide problem, and we don't have any one approach yet to it, right?
Well, we do have the one we adopted in June.
We have the one we have adopted in June, right, but we don't have, there's no, the town has to make a decision on that, whether it is
So
bonding or just.
Is the idea then that we would approve this 1.2 and 4 million, and then you go back to facilities committee and determine where that money is going to be spent?
No.
It's
This is what the facilities committee already voted on and is moving to the board this evening. The only difference is we have to have a side discussion about what portion of the athletics, because we talked about not knowing the athletics until after we talked to Craig Semple about it. This is the result of Craig Semple's work with.
And you're gonna have a side discussion about the playground. You said that, you're
No,
bringing that back to facilities.
No, that's separate. I'm saying a side discussion tonight on this. We need to decide tonight
All right.
whether we want to also cut back and push out some of the athletic expenditures, CIP projects, and then the rest of this plan that's on the new version that Bill prepared for us.
Is this sample list based on priorities? Or
Yes.
So this
Yes.
is the gym floors number one?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and so Bill says, TJ and I met and discussed each project on this 11 project list based on the costs and considering the Polson configuration of 3 grades. We would prioritize the projects the following way, assuming the track is in the works for this summer. So the track is already off, right? That's
It's already
not
funded
included
and
in this list.
not even
Exactly.
part of the conversation.
The next projects would be the following. Now, we could remove all of these and push them off another year. We could take 1, 2, 3 of them and say, let's keep them in the CIP this year and push the rest off another year. We could do whatever combination we want.
And they're already in the CIP for this year?
Yes.
Yeah, they're all in the CIP
All of them, right.
So this priority list,
for this year and next year. Well, for 19, 20, and then 2021.
So then why are we redoing them?
There's nothing
Because
else.
we're trying to cut money.
Yeah.
Bill, we have storage already in there for hand, correct?
We have storage on, yes,
Separate from this, we have storage. for
Storage,
hand,
yes.
130 or so thousand
Yes.
dollars, correct?
So press boxes.
Are you aware if any of these pose a significant safety threat?
no.
No, okay. That's important to know.
And again, another important underlying thing to recognize here is although all these projects are very important, they don't have to be done in the order that they're presently in the plan. They can be pushed off. And we may find ourselves in a better position after taking this year breather to figure out if we're gonna pursue an alternate plan that doesn't spend $100 million in capital maintenance projects over 10 years that will actually save money in the long run and get more of these projects done quicker because, if we move forward with an alternate plan that involves bonding for a new school or renovation or something like that, but it takes a lot of this stuff out of the equation, we could actually be saving the town a lot of money, and that's what we need to figure out with the other two boards.
So I would like to support Craig's number one. The gym floor is in tough shape, should be redone. I don't know where he wants to add padding on the wall, but that's always a safety issue and a concern.
Yeah.
So I'm rethinking that. I don't know if Craig knows something that I don't know about, but if he's asking for padding on the walls in the gym and the floor is in tough shape.
We did it also too.
Yeah, and it makes a significant difference, and the floor is, 2003 we did the floor, redoing it, re-putting new colors down, using it for what they use it for. It's used a ton, we all know that. It's
Can you
only,
change the color of that tape on the gym floor?
yeah, I hope so. So,
Bill, would you suggest that?
I would suggest that we take the whole amount from 2019, 20, and 2021, which is a $5,000, planning and engineering plus the $63,701. Add those together, that would make $68,701. And we add that says the town, Daniel Ann High School flooring and wall padding system. It's project 0. I have AT Athletic 007 on your list.
007.
Combine those and put them in 2020, 21?
2019, 20.
19, 20, okay,
That
accelerate
stays.
that.
Yeah, and the other next one, the baseball field is a significant, I think is warranted. We've been talking about it for 10 years at least, but it's a big number. I don't know if, that's $90-something thousand just to commit for the facility study for improving the facility. I think it's a very, very needed thing, but, it's a big dollar.
Is that the one behind Olson?
Yeah, we talked about it for years. There's significant land behind the baseball field that's wooded. If we expanded the facility, bigger, flatter field, improve that, I think it warrants lighting. It's right in the middle of our complex. We own a lot of land there. If we're gonna improve any facility and put lighting on it, that's, to me, one that stands a really good chance to do it. I think someday we should do this. When's the year and when should we do it? That's for me not to decide. I'll get it done.
Who uses the one over here on town campus?
The one over here on town campus?
Yeah, freshman baseball, maybe JV, and then on the town programs. It's the second 90-foot diamond that we have in town. Would you recommend then, Bill, just keeping the gym floor and the wall pads in, and then items 2 through 11 we would move out?
This is his list. I agree that number one is number one. The other one's,
Okay.
yeah, I refrain from commenting.
Stacy, do you sense that, from your work, you work with all three boards, that the other boards are anticipating that it would be helpful to create space for 1 year, and that 1.2 or the original number would kind of force our hand to go beyond what CIP can actually afford?
Yes, I think the 2.2 or even the 1.2 combined with town projects that have been in line for the last couple of years, I think that is over and above the pay-as-you-go, how the town has been operating. So they would be forced, the committee, the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, to go to referendum for a small bond or determine if they want to increase the capital budget. So as the budget is funded currently, there's no way they can sustain either one of these numbers as well as the projects that are in there. So I would recommend that we try to put forward the necessary projects for year one while we wait the 6 months or a year to really work, through what we need to do in the next 5 or 10 years.
Will they still go through line by line?
They will. But I think, a lower number than 2.2 or 1.2 will help the process move along a lot smoother.
Just worried that we're putting our entire capital ask, if it's, unless I'm totally misunderstanding this, is primarily a playground and athletics. And not, it's a little bit of Polson, there's like 98,000.
Well, I think we just talked about taking a lot of athletics out, and I think the point
But
is
we're
creating
separating.
room in.
I understand that.
No,
I completely understand that, but the money that we're asking for, if you actually look at what the projects are, they're not really any of the
It's for schools we know
What-
that are in the bad shape.
Well, and, no, but what your point is what is left over that we're keeping in here, what does that say about what we're doing? I'll tell you what it says about what we're doing. It says that safety for that athletic equipment, the high school is gonna stay the high school for a long time because it's a relatively new building, so that can get an upgrade to its storage facility, which it has needed for years. And at the same time, we're not spending money on schools that may be up for some kind of alteration that could avoid a lot of these costs over the 10-year horizon. And we're doubling down on our commitment when we decided that we were gonna close a school and reconfigure, that we committed to a sizable segment of our student population and community that we needed to put some effort into making the new schools that they're going into usable. And you know, yes, it's a playground, but a playground is, you know, the thing we didn't even go over, which we went over as a facilities committee, and we got the report from the playground committee, is the extent to which we're standing on thick ice when it comes to the appointments we're talking about in the playground, which is really the outside play and learning area, are all things that are important to the psychosocial development of the kids.
I got you, and I am totally in favor of working with the other town boards and dropping the numbers. I just personally don't like the project we've decided to devote all of our money to. I don't think it shows consistency in what we've been saying. So it makes me, I don't know how to vote for that, because I 100% support buying room and breathing space, but I don't think that where we've allocated the money, and I'm sorry, I know that you're the expert on this, but to me, I feel like it's not a good.
Okay, let me ask you this then, because you voted to pass the 10-year plan and you voted to pass the CIP plan when it included all the other stuff. Okay, so I understand that. When you peel back that other stuff and say, we're not getting rid of it, we're pushing it off a year so we don't spend some of it frivolously, and then you're left with the spending on buildings that we're keeping, why is that a problem?
We decided not to, we're not really spending on them, according to what you're saying. I don't know, I don't want to hold up this whole night and make everyone sit here until 1 o'clock in the morning, so I'm just explaining to you that I am fully in support of dropping the budget, but I'm having a hard time with the way the line items that you cut, so everyone else can, I'm sorry, I really don't mean to hold up.
That's quite all right, and your opinion is valuable and important, so thank you, and we don't mind spending a few extra minutes to try and get this right, because it's important. So, why don't we discuss first what we're willing to reduce from the athletic plan on Bill's, on Craig's emailed note here, and then we can see what impact that has, and then vote on the overall, right? All right, so I think what I'm hearing from most people after input from Bill is that we can push off items 2 through 11 for a year, that's 117,000.
117,241 if you minus the 68,701. Gotta do the math.
I have a question about the storage units for some of the mats and whatever equipment. What have we done before for storage?
We haven't. The mats are out in the open, I believe. I'm not really sure. I think he might carry them and put them in a container. I'm not really sure what he does with them.
Okay, so they've never been in any storage
I can't speak, this list is Craig's, and I'm feeling comfortable speaking about it. I know that he has these big, expensive jumping pits, and he needs something to, cover them. I'm not really sure. They're not out there now, so he did something with them.
Are they the same mats that the gymnasts use?
No. These mats, I believe, are the ones they use for when you run down and use the pole jumping.
Yeah. Okay.
I think they're very expensive, keeping them, undercover and taking care of them. I think where he puts them now is not really a good spot, is my understanding. And, he's trying to buy something so they can stay right where they are, cover them easily, kids can easily uncover them, it's not, it's a sophisticated kind of cover system, is how it's been explained to me.
Okay.
I do have some literature on the stuff if you want me to dig it out.
All right, so my understanding is if we push off items 2 through 11 on the athletics list and we continue with item 1 the way it is, that reduces the expenditure in the 19-20 school year by $117,241, reducing our proposed CIP number now from $1,229,272 to $1,112,031. So why don't we first vote to do that, and then I have another thing to propose that we can pull back a little bit on.
If I could make a comment.
Sure.
Sorry to walk this back. So I want to make sure I understand this. So the concern is that we all agree on the worthiness of these projects, but we're allocating too much to the playground, which would imperil the total that the board's likely to approve. We don't want.
More than
That's
50%
the
of it is the playground.
Correct. Is that a fair statement of the concern? Okay.
I'm just worried, and 0 for Jeffrey, 0 for Ryerson.
Right.
That part I appreciate why you did it though.
Right.
No, I get it, but I still.
Okay.
Did you finish your comment?
No, that's.
Or you just wanted to frame the question?
I just want to frame the question to me. And,
All right, so why don't we first vote on, and I will make a motion, the delay by 1 year of items 2 through 11 on the athletic CIP capital projects.
But that won't be the whole 217, it'll only be $148,540.
Well, how come you thought it was 117,241?
That's
It's
the total.
148, that's even better.
That's total. If you want to keep number 1.
Yeah,
you have to
yeah,
add
it says
60.
items 2 through 11.
Yeah, so then you'd only reduce the athletic portion by $148,540.
In 1920, which is the year that
1920.
we're working on CIP for.
Right.
So, understood. But
So
where do you, so
why-
can we add it again because you got one.
No, because I made a mistake, because I forgot to add 63.7 back in.
Yes,
My mistake. $68,701.
So the reduction in 1920 by removing everything except for item 1 would be 148,000 what?
I'm sorry, $148,540 would be the reduction.
Okay, so if we take.
So you're taking out AT002 all the way to 6?
I took 217,000.
The only one staying is the 5,000.
That's
No, we added the 63.
80,732.
Oh, I got it, thank you.
All right, so if we remove items 2 through 11 and push them off 1 year into 2021 rather than 1920, then that saves a net reduces $148,540 from the current total of $1,229,272. The new total would be $1,080,732, just over $1 million. Why don't we vote on that first? And then I have another idea that we could maybe do too. All right, so my motion, I hereby move to take items 2 through 11 on the athletic CIP list for 2018, 1920 and
Thank you.
2000. Bye-bye, thank you. We take the items on, sorry, let me start over again. I hereby move to remove items 2 through 11 on the 2019-20 athletic CIP improvement projects and push them off 1 year into 2020-21, thereby reducing the 1920 CIP year by $148,540, resulting in a new net of $1,080,732. That's the motion.
Second.
Okay,
All right.
so let's,
I think you have to just do discussion real quick. I think
yes.
we're keeping item 7 in, even though it's not on this list. In the plan, it's item number 7.
The
Just to be
June floor.
accurate.
Yeah, he's reading the
Yes.
memo.
He's reading the emails.
Yes,
Just
and I
back
gave it
there.
to the note taker.
Yes.
Okay.
I gave it to
Thank
the
you.
note
You
taker, so
followed
that
us,
you
Laura?
know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Item 007 is being retained.
Right, it's
Yeah.
being
All
retained. So
other
he said
items.
2 through 11, but we're actually
What he
retaining 7.
said.
Yeah.
Are we?
Yeah, I was, yeah,
Yes.
items 2 through 11, I should be clear, items 2 through 11 on
Craig's-
Craig's list, Craig's list.
Craig's email
Craig's
dated
email.
October 4th,
Yes.
2018.
I have another
But
question.
leaving in item AT007
Right.
in the actual
Are we,
CIP.
Billy, are we moving the 63,000 into 1920?
Yes.
Okay, then our savings will only be 54,000 something.
What?
No, I took, if you add 63,000 plus the 5,000, that's $68,701. I subtracted that from the 217,244, which is the total for that year.
But we're keeping, we're, I'm sorry to be a stick in the mud.
No,
here. We're keeping the 94,650 for the baseball, correct?
No,
We're not. I thought we were jettisoning everything.
we're jettisoning everything, I thought, except
the
for
gym floor and the wall pad.
the.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I thought we were keeping 1 through 2. My
No, no,
mistake.
No, no, no.
I'm so 15 minutes ago. I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
All right.
Sorry.
It's late.
Thank you. All right.
So,
So,
Okay.
everybody clear on the motion?
No,
There's been
I
sec-
have a question.
Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So if we agree to this motion and we put this off a year, at this time next year, if we have this discussion, are we allowed to put this off another year if something else comes up, or are we?
yeah, we
We're
always are.
allowed. Always
Okay.
allowed to do
The
whatever we
planning
choose as a
document,
board.
you're only approving the 1 year.
Okay,
This is a 5-year planning document that we expanded into a 10-year planning document. We approved the funds for this fiscal year that we're gonna go to budget with.
so
And that's what the
even though
town's
we
gonna vote on.
say that we're pushing it off a year, we can change our mind in another year?
Yeah, which is
Right.
the nature of planning, yeah.
Okay,
And push it off again, because let's say one of the boilers is worse than I thought it was gonna be, and now you gotta replace the boiler somewhere.
And that priority changes.
Right.
gotcha, thank you.
Sure.
I call the question, can we vote on it?
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries.
Our first
Thank
item
you,
of
everybody.
agreement,
That will
thank
at
you.
least help us go to
Okay.
CIP and.
So I have another
We
idea.
didn't vote on, but we didn't vote on the total.
Nope, we didn't vote on the total yet. We voted on an interim total, but I have another proposal.
No, we just voted on removing the athletic items. We
Yes,
just voted on the
exactly.
interim
Right,
title.
correct.
Exactly,
Okay,
exactly.
okay.
We have an interim total we're working with that only removed the athletic items.
Yeah, no, we haven't agreed to that interim total.
Yeah.
As far as I know, we've taken the
Oh, yeah,
athletic
you're right.
items
You're
from
right,
the
you're right.
total, the 2.3.
Well, it takes
Right.
another one,
First
two,
step.
two,
Yeah.
nine, so,
First step.
okay.
Okay, okay.
Regardless,
We gotta
that's
be official.
semantics.
Well, we have to
Um,
vote on that new total.
Yes, we will vote on a new total, but before we do, we have to get down to that final new total. And what I would like to move in order to help get there is, where the heck are you?
Look at the playground.
Yeah, there we go. I'm looking for a playground, thank you. There we go, yep. All right, so if everyone looks at the Brown School and looks at item sadly named BS-008. No, that is, and you look
Page
to.
2 of 5.
Oh, sorry, yeah, page 2 of 5. So you're looking at Brown School in the year 2019-20. At BS-008, you will find the playground improvements, 4th and 5th grade. And that presently totals $654,933. That's 600.
Go ahead.
Missing someone, I'm gonna have to stop this. The $654,933
Yes.
includes $118,000.
110,103 is the contingency.
For contingency
Right.
fee, which is at a 15% contingency.
for the overall project.
I
correct?
propose, and I will make a motion of this after we discuss it. I propose, well, I guess I have to make the motion before we discuss it. But I propose that we curtail the contingency to half its present value at 7.5%. So that should bring down the 110,000 to about 55,000, right?
Yeah, why don't you just make it 55,000?
All right, why don't we make that 55,000? I'm just saying, I'm recommending, Katie, that we reduce the playground contingency from 15% to approximately 7.5%, make it an even $55,000 instead of 110,000. So then we'll be removing exactly 55,000 from the 654,933, making it,
$600,000.
yeah, 599,933. All right, and that would bring us under $1 million by about $54,000.
Yep, we need a firm number on that.
Yeah, we would. What's that?
We need a firm number on
Well,
that.
we will,
Okay.
but this isn't the motion yet. I'm
Gotcha.
just
Oh, okay.
saying the net effect of this,
Yep.
what the motion will become.
So
I
we,
understand.
so we get under, we get under the million, at the risk of an overrun in case contingency is more. And it does, I mean, the playground is a statement of priorities. You feel it's necessary for the educational mission. And you know, whether it's $5.99 or $600, isn't that kind of cosmetic? Isn't that kind of a political game? I'm trying to anticipate what the board
It
selectmen
is,
will
but
approve.
we're all people, and psychologically, it might be more palatable to the people on the other boards if they see that it's under $1 million. I'm not married to it either. This vote can go either way as far as I'm concerned. I'm just adding it for the purpose of consideration.
I mean, Bill does a great job of bringing things under budget. I think he'll probably continue, but.
But what if?
But what if, right?
I agree. So that is to say, I can't disagree.
Any other
with
thoughts on that?
statement.
If you only reduce it by 55,000 though, right? You're at $1,080,000.
Oh, it doesn't bring either. No.
Yeah, you're only at
It doesn't bring it.
$1,800,000. You have to reduce the whole contingency at 110. So what that does is that, you know, it will just reduce what we do. You know, you can't, there's gonna be issues. Every construction project, there's issues. If you take out the contingency, you're gonna reduce the scope. It's just that simple.
I would rather clearly explain to the Board of Selectmen why this is important, why it's a community asset, and its return on investment, rather than fudge the number up or down a little bit.
I think that's absolutely right. I agree with that.
And that's just my opinion.
I would be happy to have that motion done. I don't need to make the motion if we have consensus here, but just leave
Okay.
it in.
Yeah, if you're not changing
I
anything,
withdraw
then
the
you don't
motion.
need to.
I withdraw the motion to have it exist.
Okay.
And, but, yeah, because if we explain it clearly, with the presentation that we all received, we don't want to put them in a position to say they're against the children, of course they're not, but they need to understand what the benefits are.
Yeah. All right.
And if we sell it, that it's truly a need, and then we get a cost overrun, then
Right.
then we have a
Then we have to go
problem.
back and ask for more. And
Yeah.
that seems to suggest.
I'd rather address it up front.
It's better to plan than to go for an
That's a good point.
emergency special appropriation, I absolutely agree. And hopefully, the way projects normally go, you know, we probably will end up returning money to the town at the end of the project, and that's a good thing too, I think we can all agree. It may not be all 110,000 of it, but it'll, you know, I'm sure will be some. All right,
Okay.
so, I now move that we vote on the reductions as noted, which will bring our 2019-2020, well, wait, do we have to move, I'm sorry, I withdraw that for a moment. We also have to calculate how much we're moving over to the 2020 one.
said you're only doing a year.
So
So
can you
it
clarify
would be
that
that
for me,
number.
Seth? What, we only moved one thing
Yeah,
over, right?
you're right.
63,000.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Only doing the
Yep, we're only
As
doing 1
amended.
year.
Thank you,
Yes,
Violet.
you.
One
Sorry.
away.
Thanks, I got myself all screwed up.
Okay.
I always do. All right, so I move that we incorporate all of the amendments and discussion points that we had this evening, which will bring our 2019-2020 CIP request to $1,080,000 instead, I'm sorry, $1,080,732.
Second.
I'm sorry, can I just ask for a clarifying question?
Sure.
Why are we not bringing the 63,701 over to the 1920 budget?
We did.
We did.
We did.
No, I
Coming
thought
out
you
with a
just said
different
we
number.
didn't. I thought you said, that was the whole discussion about why it was 148,000.
Yeah, no, I did. We took the 217, which was the original number at the bottom,
Yeah.
and I subtracted $68,701. So I moved 68 over there. So there is gonna be, the bottom line in the athletic, bottom line is gonna be $68,701. That's what we're gonna spend on the 19-20 year.
Because we're nuking everything else.
We're moving everything over a year.
Right.
So we're gonna spend $68,701 in athletics for the year 19-20 if it's approved through the budget process.
And then what are you spending in 2021? You're moving everything over the other side, right?
I'm sure. I could do that easily. I'll move everything 1 year. I'll move the 2021 to 21-22, and I'll move all the other items from 19-20 to 20-21.
So that makes that 148, the savings, 148,740 would go in 2021, and you're just pushing the million to 21-22.
Yeah, and I'll adjust the numbers. I don't think we need to calculate them right here. I think this.
So we can
next
vote on
year.
as amended.
We can vote on it as amended, knowing that the approximate amount will be around 1 million, between 1,050,000 and 1,080,000. Right?
So the number's gonna be whatever.
1,100,000.
It's gonna be whatever that is, 1.2 minus the 148,540, if that's the number, 1 million.
Well, then that is 1,080,732.
I think we're good with that.
Okay.
And we have to vote on this as 5-year, we can't just vote on it as one.
No, we can't vote to reduce the 1 year and keep everything else technically the same from the perspective of the CIP and the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Finance.
So then I'll adjust the plan, and then I'll submit it to the board, the Board of Selectmen approved this date, like I did when you did it on June 19th.
Assuming we pass this.
Assuming
then
that's,
yes.
yeah.
So I call the question, we had a motion, we had a second.
Second, Violet. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Abstain? Motion carries.
Thank you all.
Okay.
Does that come out of facilities?
What's that?
No, that's it. That was, item
Okay.
10, so it would be after 10, 11.
No, but they come out of the facilities.
Did it come out of facilities as a
Yeah.
motion?
Yeah.
No, we did it as
This
a
was a
full
separate-
board. Full board,
separate full
direct
board.
full board action.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any old business? Thank you, Violet.
No problem, happy to talk about it.
Future agenda items, meetings and dates of importance are attached. And I
I
need,
could postpone the executive session, given it's been 3 hours, but,
to all of you, it was something you had requested.
I say do it.
Yeah, let's just do it.
Okay.
I'm leaving so I can.
Motion
Yeah.
to, adjourn into, executive session.
Thank you.
So moved.
So, second.
I need to excuse you, Greg.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night, Greg. Thank you.
Can't be by phone.
It can't be by phone, huh?
No, for executive. I don't know how to hang up.
Get that Russian
I don't know how to do this.
Russian quiet.
Okay.
You guys
Good night,
have a
Bill.
great
Thank
night.
you.
Toodles, Bill, thank you.
Gail.